Okay, we'll start, as we usually do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Colleen, will you start us, please?
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will start with roll call, but we have two new members here tonight, from elected member and select board member, so I'll have you let us know who you are when we get to you. Starting with Dave.
Dave Pierce, I'm an alternate member.
Richard Freeman.
Barbara Griffin.
Tim Searles, I'm a newly elected.
Welcome, Tim.
Colleen Bayou.
Tim Redmond.
Scott Azana, Town Engineer.
Joshua Douglas, Selectman.
Welcome, Joshua.
Thank you.
Philip Devanza.
Joanne Duffy, Planning and Economic Development Director.
Thank you all. We're going to start with, we're going to go out of order. We'll start with reappointment of Dave as an alternate to the planning board. Dave, I texted Dave and he said the paperwork was taken care of, Joanne?
Well, I haven't received the paperwork, but that's okay. You can go ahead and reappoint him, and I'll get the paperwork tomorrow from Catherine.
Mr. Chair, my electronic submission for appointment simply stated that I've been on as an alternate for some 8 years.
Okay.
That was my qualification statement.
All right, so does this have to be by a voice vote or a motion? How does that have to be done,
Should be
Joanne?
by motion.
Okay.
Make a motion to reappoint David Gesheis to this alternate of this planning board.
Second.
Motion to reappoint Dave to a 3-year term as an alternate planning board member. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. David,
Thank
welcome
you.
back. Approval and correction of the March 13th minutes rather.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of March 13th.
Second.
Any corrections or changes from anyone? So motion is to accept the minutes as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Abstain? Select board member votes.
Tim,
I
are you
wasn't there for the meeting.
Are you
Okay, let's
abstaining
make
as
sure you
well?
know.
No, I said aye.
Okay.
Just so you know, under Robert's rules, even if you're not at a meeting, you can vote on the minutes.
Okay.
The
I'm
rules work, just so you know that.
asking.
I did read the meetings, but still, I wasn't.
Yeah. Most people don't.
Okay. So we have something for number 4. We'll bring it up when the time comes for the applicant. It's a letter from the Grassmere Water Precinct. We'll bring that up at an appropriate time. And there's a letter from the SAU 19 regarding impacts to the schools in relation to the Acorn Drive. So we'll make sure those letters are duly noted. And then there's recommendation to the select board to appoint Joanne as a full member to the SNHPC to replace Colleen.
So,
Joanne?
do you first want to make a motion to accept Colleen's resignation with regret?
Or you can accept my resignation with pleasure if you want.
Do they need an-
I'll make that motion as a fellow member.
Second.
And I'll just, the Tuesday meetings are, I unfortunately can't attend with my current work schedule, and I think it's important that the town have a full representation, so being that I'd be absent a lot, just not able to attend at this point.
Motion made to accept Colleen's resignation from Southern New Hampshire Planning. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Hey, Colleen, you make the motion now.
Okay, I will move to recommend to the select board that Joanne Duffy be appointed as a full member of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
Second.
Okay, motion made to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that Joanne replace Colleen as the full member to the Southern New Hampshire Planning. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes.
And that leaves an alternate seat
So we need an
open.
alternate. Does anybody want to volunteer to be the alternate on Southern New Hampshire Planning?
They meet, their main meeting is once a month, and it's at 11:30 in the morning at Southern New Hampshire Planning. Or you can do it over the computer online.
Is there a volunteer application online?
Is it currently? I have to check.
Why don't you do that?
Probably
'Cause if
not.
nobody I mean, it can be anybody. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be from the planning
Right.
board, so. We have
Oh, it could be
somebody.
a citizen at
Yeah,
large
we have somebody on the board who is a representative who's not on the planning board, so,
presently.
yes.
Yep.
Oh, so we have 2 members on the Southern.
We have 3 members.
I mean, 2 without this one being filled, right?
Right.
So we're still all right for a while.
Oh, yeah. And
We'll just
but we-
hound planning board members to do it in the future. Okay, we'll move off. Okay. Anything else, Joanne, for tonight that I've, nothing else on correspondence and action items?
No, the only thing on the, on upcoming meetings, we have not received the New Boston application yet. We had received a copy and it was, in pretty poor condition, so Scott and I told them to redo it, so we're just waiting for them to resubmit, so I'm not sure if that date is positive or not.
Okay.
And then we do have
They
an.
still have time to meet the deadline.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we do have an application coming in, I believe it's for our next meeting, for the former Masonic Temple. The ZBA approved of the use as residential and some other variances that they needed.
5 in total, I
5
think.
variances, and I think there was a special exception as well, to turn that into a 12-unit multifamily building with.
And we'll talk about that when the time comes. Not tonight. Okay, just because I don't want them to get lost in the night, I want to put the letters into the record from people that sent in letters for applications. For the record, we got a correspondence, at my suggestion at a prior meeting, about hooking up to the Grassmere Water Precinct on Juniper Drive. The applicant went to Grassmere Water Precinct, and they have sent a letter to the applicant stating that they cannot hook up to the Juniper Water system because there's not enough pressure to push water all the way up to this project. So that is in the record.
I think it's inadequate size too for the.
Size and
addition.
pressure, yeah.
Was it paid in SARS and it needs to be
And it matches into Manchester's.
Anybody who wants to read the letter that was in your packet, I believe, tonight, last night, this week? Okay, we also have a letter from SAU 19 that talks about the impact to the schools in relation to the Acorn Drive subdivision. That letter is also being entered into the record. On the table tonight, where did I go? We had some other letters. We have a letter from Adam and Lauren Cook, 50 Acorn Drive, stating their opposition to the project. It's on the record. Thank you. We have a letter from Sherry Harden, 45 Cinnamon Drive, expressing opposition to the project. The letter is also in the record. Thank you very much. And from Jody George, 24 Acorn Drive, also an opposition letter to the project. So the letters have been duly noted and they are in the record.
Tim, I have one more letter that
Thank you.
came in tonight, from, let me just get it here. Josh Hartnett. Oh, out there.
He's in the audience?
He is in a butter, and I can't provide you with a written copy, but I'm sure Mr. Harnett can.
Well, we'll
address
just
that.
note that the notice was sent to the planning office. It has not been made available to the planning board members, so it will be entered into the record at a later date. Because we don't have it. All right, I think that covers the bits and pieces prior to beginning the process tonight. Do you have anything for us, Joanne, before we ask the applicant to come up to the table?
No, there are two items on your agenda. One is for the 2-lot subdivision, and the other is for the 46-lot subdivision. They're all intertwined because it's the same parcel of land. The 2-lot subdivision divides the land with the existing house on Terrell Hill Road and the access from Terrell Hill Road into that site. That will remain with the existing owner, and then that separates it from the large parcel with the 46 lot subdivision and the open space. So even though they're separated as two applications, they're really one package, and I would suggest that the approvals both hinge on one another. You wouldn't want to approve one without the other.
Well, board members, how do you want to handle that?
So my only suggestion is that I think the first, the separating the larger lot into two, we need to do and handle that first, because if that's not done, we can't look at the
Right.
other lot. And that first one, if we approve that subdivision, we grant a conditional approval, it's up to the applicant if they then decide, if for some reason we don't approve the second piece, then the applicant does not have to move ahead with filing plans and actually recording the subdivision. So I think though we can't approve that second, I think that we can take the first application as a standalone and act on that cleanly, and then if the applicant decides in the future they don't, depending on what happens with the subsequent project, they don't have to move ahead with filing and recording. And that's, I just think, a way to keep it clean.
Yeah, I think we should act on them individually, and they can do what they
Yeah.
want with them later. Okay, so that's how we're gonna handle it.
Barbara's good.
Barbara?
In the past, we have dealt with this, and we have dealt with it by approving something like we see in this case, a subdivision, and the first condition of approval is approval of the other application, so that you don't end up with an approval on our records of a subdivision in any way, so that you don't have somebody coming in and relying on that subdivision for something in the future. So, anyways, I just, there is some history with it, so we can decide that at the time, but,
We'll just make sure that any motions that are crafted for the first application are crafted correctly.
yeah.
So guess who gets to make motions when the time comes? BG. Okay, anything else from board members, questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll ask the applicant to come on up. Could you please turn the board to the audience, Doug, so they can see the board? We have plans, they don't. And we'll hopefully be able to follow along with you. Just guide us verbally.
Good evening. For the record, my name's Doug McGuire with the DeBay Group, and I'm here representing the applicants, the Lee's Real Estate Holdings LLC, regarding this property. I'll give just a brief reminder of where we stand on the two-lot subdivision in question. The overall parent parcel is much larger than the subsequent application that we have coming before you. And so therefore, our proposal is to subdivide that piece. What we have is, the existing parcel is 237.75 acres. And what we're proposing to do is keep 78 and change acres with the existing parcel and frontage along Terrell Hill Road, so there's an existing building on the property there, and the remainder to be subdivided with a proposed access, or existing access off of Acorn Drive, and a proposed access via a lot line adjustment between a home on Sage Court, creating a 60-foot access point, which is intended to become a future right-of-way. But that would be a parcel of land that would be consolidated into the parcel up above, creating those two pieces. And so that's really the limit of the two-lot subdivision. It's technically a two-lot subdivision, and lot line adjustment plan, and that is how it's technically detailed. So with that, I'll return it back to the board. I know we talked about this at our first meeting, so if there's any further questions, I'm happy to answer.
Board members, question for the applicant? All right. If everyone wants to hold off on any more questions, I can open the public hearing, and we can get public comment, and then we can come back to the board members if anything else comes up from the public comment. The board members concur with that?
Question.
Barbara?
I noticed in the packet that we had further comments on this project in connection with information that Doug had submitted, not only for the hydro study, but from conservation. So were we dealing with that before or after public comment?
So,
Well, let's listen to the comments then from both those.
so if we're doing the two-lot subdivision first, those comments are on.
The
The second
one.
one, so
Yeah.
we'll just go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So if no one has any questions at this time, board members, we can move to public comment, and then we can come back to the board. So Doug, I'm sure people are gonna come up, so I would ask you to just roll around by David or something if you like, and step back.
Mr. Chair, just a suggestion that,
Please.
obviously, this is only related to the two-lot subdivision,
Yeah.
so any concerns about, we'll have plenty of time to open for that.
Right, so everybody does understand, any comments at this time are related to the request for the subdivision,
he's just talking-
not
he's
the
talking
not the
about
proposed
this.
project that
He's
is
just
gonna
talking
come
about
after this discussion. So, open the public hearing right now. If anybody would like to speak, please come up to the table, give us your name and your address, and happy to have your comments.
I have a question. My name's Roger Belrose, 127 Terrell Hill Road. My question's with the two-lot subdivision on the existing, is it the existing 67 Terrell Hill?
It's the White House.
Correct.
Big problem.
So you're gonna subdivide the farmhouse from, can you explain how it's gonna work?
I'll let
Maybe
the,
describe.
could
so
you
we can-
describe on the map where the lines are, please, Doug?
Yeah, thank you.
So if you recall, at our last public hearing, I brought a couple of overview exhibits that were just for the intent of describing this, and I think it's helpful to have this visual. So, I brought it with me again just in case. So, what you have here is the entirety of the yellow line is the entire parcel of the way it stands right now, the 237 plus acres. The proposal of the two-lot subdivision that's being discussed at the moment is creating this yellow line in between. So it's going to subdivide this parcel along Terrell Hill with 78 plus acres here and leave 160 acres up above, and that's the extent of it.
So what's the intent of the parcel that you're keeping with the home on?
Well, I don't think that's not something we would answer a question about tonight, because they don't have any answers.
Okay.
They're basically cutting the lot in half to use the portion that they need to do the proposed subdivision.
Thank you. The line that goes through the pond, is that like an arbitrary point that was picked?
So, the intent of, honestly, the intent of the line and why it's where it is that there was a certain available upland area as part of the next development that we're gonna speak about, and that development has more than enough open space as the requirements require, and so whatever wasn't needed for this development was left with the parent parcel. That was the rationale.
Any discussion of future development of the lower lot is a discussion for another time, which we don't discuss tonight. We're just putting 2 lots on the record with a proposed lot line adjustment on the upper right-hand corner to access Sage Court.
Off of Sage, right?
So that's what this lot line adjustment and subdivision is about. Creating a parcel that stays with the parent lot, parent home, and creating a parcel where they're gonna propose a plan for a housing project.
Okay, so, my mind, potentially in the future, that's available for development at that point.
It's available for development if you can develop it or not. Nobody knows what the
Understand.
topography
I
is in
understand.
that business.
I mean, but there's gotta be some kind of grand plan, and that's what I'm asking, and I understand the board's position. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Nothing else from the comments from the public tonight? Okay, I will close public hearing. Board members, questions for the applicant regarding the request to subdivide this parcel?
I just have more of a clarification for Joanne, and I think to say for the record to make sure it's clear. So the parcel that's being created, the proposed map 654-1, does not have the minimum frontage that would be required in the zone, which is why there is a note on the plan that this, which normally we would not be able to approve something that didn't meet zoning, but there is a note that this will be considered a non-buildable lot until there's a future approval of another plan. And there's
Correct.
also, that's why we have that condition or recommendation number 3 that you're saying the applicant be contingent upon the 46 subdivision approval.
Correct.
So there's no issue or concern with us creating this new lot that doesn't meet zoning because we're saying you can't develop it without,
Correct. They can't develop it without the approval of the new road.
okay.
Everybody hear that?
Can you clarify?
Yeah, so.
Go ahead, Conrad.
Yeah, so in that point, even if we approve this subdivision, it's almost, the approval is almost moot, it's a moot point if they don't build the road. This subdivision really is not valid and can't stand because the lot, the larger lot they're creating right now doesn't have the 200 feet of frontage, the road frontage.
Road frontage.
That, until they, get an approval and build a road. So it's just, our approving of this really is contingent by that note on the plan and by your recommended
Right.
condition.
Correct.
Okay.
Clear on that now?
Is that,
Thank you.
Everybody shaking their heads yes or shaking their heads no? I'm trying to watch everybody out there. Okay.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
ask the question. I
Wait,
will say.
please come up and, for the record, you have to give us your name.
Okay, Ellen Estabrooks, 122 Terrell Hill Road.
Ellen,
Estabrooks,
thank you.
122 Terrell Hill.
Thank you.
So, I guess, I'm just not sure, are you still talking about, the addition onto, Acorn? Or are you down talking to the road going in on the Janigans property?
They're talking about, what they're saying is even if we approve the subdivision lines that they're asking for, they cannot build anything on this lot until a subdivision road is built to connect Acorn Drive to Sage Court.
So we are talking about the Acorn Road. Okay, that's
Yes.
I didn't know if you were talking about that one, the new.
Yeah, it wasn't clear- it
proposed
wasn't
road for
clear.
The lower
Thanks.
lot.
The lower lot is no discussion on the lower lot for any kind of development. It's just a piece of land that goes with the house that's down on Terrell Hill Road.
Okay,
So
but
large-
there's no planned road down there then yet?
We don't have anything on our plans tonight for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just, I pretty much was wondering, the parcel A that's in this motion that we're about to vote on, that's included in the lot line adjustment,
Yes.
right? And so, all you're saying is the development, the road has to reach from parcel A to Acorn Drive before any,
Houses can be built in there.
okay.
Because it's got to do with road frontage. The requirement is this a 2-acre zone up here? Is this?
It is a
act-
2-acre zone, but it's an open space.
But under normal conditions, you need
Correct.
200 feet.
Correct.
For an agricultural lot, which is a 2-acre lot, you need 200 feet of frontage for a house lot. But this is a cluster subdivision request, so there's gonna be reduced frontage for the houses.
Understood.
Board members?
I'll just say, I don't have any comment. It meets the requirements of zoning. I don't know that, I mean, to the extent that we're approving something that can be built with the open space, I just don't know that there's any point to voting on it now.
Well, I think we need to in order to be able to.
Okay, I don't know that we're voting on the other ones, so that's why I mean, that's fine, but.
Well, you gotta put the horse before the cart.
Okay.
I have a question.
It's too late, public hearing is closed, sir. So, I don't think it's prudent to not vote on this. I think we have to give the applicant clarity that the board is either gonna approve of the subdivision or not, because we don't wanna hear a whole long story about the subdivision, only to find out the board votes against the lot line adjustment and the subdividing of the parcel. Phil?
Yeah, I would just point out though, if we were going to, vote no on this, we would have to have, reasons.
Yes, we would, that reason.
And I don't find any reason, anything, I mean, there's no conditional use permit required, so there's no discussion there, and there are no waivers, and as Barbara pointed out, it meets every requirement in zoning.
We just need somebody brave enough to make a motion.
I'll make a motion, and I guess I'm gonna, in my findings of fact here, be clear that that because this application is presented complies with the regulations, the development regulations and the zoning ordinance, and that is inclusive of that note restricting this for development, because of the frontage, that right now we are creating this lot, it meets the regulations with that, restriction at this time. And I would, move then to, approve the subdivision and lot line adjustment plan, as presented with the recommended conditions included in the staff recommendation memorandum. There were 9 conditions that were, administrative conditions, in terms of, notes in the plan, revising, providing some stamps and signatures and such, so.
Do you want to add a condition that it would be conditioned on the second application
It is in
being
here.
approved?
Condition number 3, addresses that.
If we could reword condition
Yeah,
number 3.
it's not, I was gonna
number
vote,
3,
I'm voting against it unless
Just-
we clean this up.
to say approval shall be contingent upon the 46 lot subdivision approval due to the lack of frontage for map 6, lot 54-1.
Because otherwise we are creating a non-conforming lot, and we
Sure.
can't do that. So if we clean that up, I'll vote for it.
So Colleen, would you amend your motion to use the words, the application approval be contingent upon the 46 lot subdivision approval,
Yes,
as stated in number 3?
yes.
Anybody want to discuss the motion? Board members?
Yes, I think what Barbara was saying is that number 3 is not written properly.
Well, I think we just changed it.
Did we change it?
We'll amend, I'm gonna accept the amendment to my motion to change number 3 to reflect the language Joanne stated, where,
So it says approval shall be contingent upon the 46 lot subdivision approval due to the lack of frontage for map 6, lot 54-1.
yes.
Okay, everybody clear on the motion?
Into the amendment, yeah.
I didn't get a second though. Colleen made the motion.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
1 no, and abstentions?
Abstain.
1 abstention. So the subdivision of the parcel is conditionally approved upon the applicant getting an approval for the 46 lot subdivision, is the basic terminology of the motion. Okay. Anybody have any questions for staff regarding the subdivision request before we ask the applicant to speak tonight? I will ask, before Doug speaks, I will ask to the hydrology report. Joanne, can you tell us about what's going on? It was requested at a prior meeting.
Yes, so a hydrology report was submitted. It was reviewed by Scott, and Scott had some questions regarding whether or not the new wells could handle irrigation and possibly filling of swimming pools. He had some other issues, and Doug had reached out to a company called Verdantis, and a David McLean, who's a PG from Verdantis, addressed the issues that Scott had concerns about, and I guess Scott could speak to this. He said he was fairly comfortable with it.
Sure, so, I noticed some anomalies, I'd call them, in the total yield. So, to give everyone an overview of what this gentleman did was, he went to DES's database and found all the well information that they had on file. And he kind of collated all the data and basically said there were 300 some odd wells within a mile and 150 something within a half mile. And their yields upon drilling varied from about 1 gallon per minute to 300 and something. And that was one of my questions, was what kind of well yields 300 some odd gallons. And his answer to that was it was DES's number. He took those high yielding wells out and showed that the average yield within that area is still around 15 gallons per minute. And then my other one wasn't really a comment on him. I just wanted the board to understand a statement that was within his conclusion.
Page 6.
Page 6?
Right there.
Okay. Yeah, so accordingly guarantees that there will be no adverse impacts cannot be provided. This analysis assumes that proposed residential wells will be limited to providing water for domestic use. The impact of extensive withdrawals of landscaping, extensive irrigation, farming, or other excessive water uses such as filling swimming pools is not considered. So, and conclusions and recommendations are based on limited data over a limited time frame. Verdantis makes no warranty or guarantee regarding the impact of nearby wells. So those were the
2 high points.
the 2 high points, yeah, of the conclusion that I wanted to. Go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt you. But
I was pretty much done.
Bill?
Yeah, and on page 7, what I found, the study was limited to review and evaluation of data compiled by others. And as you said, conclusion, recommendation based on limited data over a limited time frame. They make no warranties or guarantee regarding the impact of nearby wells. And the final sentence is, additional studies could reveal information that contradicts findings provided in this letter.
No. So it's,
Then, going through the rest of it, fire department says that they're all gonna be sprinkled. When they mentioned the other things that they didn't include, there was no reference to sprinklers. I understand that they're dry systems, but how, is there any impact on that? And I guess the other thing is, you have the size of the lots, your zoning, and many people in the agricultural area have small gardens. They do irrigations. Many of them have irrigation systems on their lawns. It would only seem to me logical that you would put a number in there to increase it by a percentage. Perhaps 10%, 15%, I have no idea.
Can I present before you guys
No.
rip the report apart?
I'm
Not
not
just
trying to
yet.
rip the report, I'm
You'll
just
get your
asking
chance
some
to
questions.
I just would be helpful if I could present it first.
Because I have something else to read into the record that is on the opposite side of that. The low yielding wells documentation from, on page 4 states that, wells with yields of less than 1 gallon per minute are considered problematic by DES. However, a yield considered adequate for domestic use by NHDES. So if you got 1 gallon per minute, DES is saying that's enough water for domestic use. They're not saying that it's enough to water your lawn or have a garden, but they're saying for normal house use, that's what the report cites in the, as DES standards. In terms of the fire spill, I think that, I know a lot of people with low yield wells, they put a tank in their basement and that's where their fire suppression system runs off. So that's up to the fire department.
So I can elaborate a little bit more about the use of the wells. So basically, this report took a document from New Hampshire DES that states that I think it's over 4 hours, a well should be able to yield, forget the exact number,
See if I can find it.
960 gallons over 4 hours. And what this report looked at was if you have a well that's drilled X amount of feet, it can hold a water column of some specific height, and I forget, there's like around 200 and some
I
odd
think
feet.
I think they used 200.
Yeah.
I thought I remember reading.
And I checked the math, and if you had a water column of that height, it would hold the 906 gallons. So if you have a low yielding well, you meet that criteria of 960 gallons over 4 hours. So the data in here appears to be good. The way they checked it is correct. It's just they're not making any guarantees that it'll affect other wells. I just wanted to make sure the board understood that. I am not a geologist or a hydrologist, so I can't really speak on the science behind it, and I did try to look some of it up, and it's not a lot of great info out there, so.
All right, well, we'll hold off, unless somebody else has something to say, we'll hold off and we'll let Doug respond. Anything other than the hydrogeologic evaluation you wanted to tell us? How about the Conservation Commission comments?
Joanne?
Conservation Commission
You said there was conservation,
has, so they went on one site walk, and I have, excuse me, a report that was on February 8th. The ground was covered with snow at that time. They're asking for the ability to go out on another site walk that they have scheduled for the middle of April to determine whether there are any vernal pools on site.
Okay. Anything?
They seem to think there is one or two, and it might be nearby the roadway, but they're not sure because they haven't been able to actually go view it.
Any questions for Joanne on conservation comments at this time? Okay, did you have another one, Joanne? I thought you said there was two, or was the hydrology study one of the two you mentioned?
No, that was the only one right now. Oh, the other thing is, you should probably know this, is, so the open space of this subdivision, the Conservation Commission did go to the Select Board Monday night and ask that the Conservation Commission take over this open space land, and that it be owned by the town under the not ownership, but under the management of the Conservation Commission. So far that the Select Board needs to hold 2 hearings. So they've scheduled, or they're in the process of scheduling those hearings, which takes roughly about, according to David Neiman, about 5 weeks out to do that, because they have to be so many days separated from each other. And so we won't know for sure if that goes through by the Select Board for another month or so. But that's where that's at right now. So they are in favor of taking over. There is a prime wetland on that open space, and they would like to add that to their inventory.
The conservation committee is in favor of that. I think the select board said we're willing to hear the plan. We didn't say we're in favor, we're willing to
Right.
go.
Right, that's what I meant, if it sounded like it was the select board.
And so, you know, the open space subcommittee, that's one of the things that we're looking at is what do various communities do in regards to this land, and what does Goffstown want to do with this land?
And I did watch the meeting, and David Neiman, he was stressing that the reason that the Conservation Commission would like to do this is because there's not a lot of public land, open land in that area of town, and this would be open to for public use.
Okay.
Somebody
Well, that's-
wanted to go on a hike,
It's a
passive
proposal.
recreation.
Well,
Anybody else?
later.
All right, Doug, the floor is yours. You can proceed whichever way you want to go. You want to start with the overall plan first, and you can nitpick later?
You know what, I have a very nice, thorough presentation I'd like to make, and if I can move forward, I would love to do that.
We'd like to
So-
hear it. Please start.
Again, for the record, Doug McGuire with the Dubay Group, representing the same applicant, Belize Real Estate Holdings LLC, on this 46 lot open space development. I think we had a very productive, long but productive meeting on this last. I took a lot away from that. I listened to the concerns that board members brought up, members of the public, as well as staff. And our intention in coming back was to have all of these items addressed. And that was our goal, and I feel that we have done that. We took a little bit longer than we expected. We asked for one continuance, and that was mainly to give staff an opportunity to more thoroughly review the hydrogeologic study that was submitted. And so now, and I think that was the right thing to do, to give Scott an opportunity and Joanne an opportunity to review that, as well as the board members. So, I would like to talk about a few of the items that I took away from the overall concerns of the parties mentioned. So obviously, number one, there was a large engineering review list at the time. I have worked with Scott on 2 iterations of that. We've had enough time that he was able to provide comments. We provided revised plans. He provided additional or requested additional clarifications. We provided another set of plans. And where we stand now is a very, very minimalistic remaining comments. Many are notations, and I'll let Scott speak to that when it's appropriate, but we are very comfortable. We met with Scott in person. We had a couple teleconferences with him to go through certain items and walk through certain intricacies of the plan, but I think we're in a very good place as far as engineering goes, which is obviously important. The other big piece that we spent a fair amount of time on was discussing obviously the traffic. We had done, as we presented, a very in-depth traffic study for the overall scope of this project, and that was in the process of being reviewed. We had received comments from the third-party peer review consultant VHB on that, and so our traffic consultant Tetra Tech responded to those items and submitted supplemental information after having a teleconference meeting or Zoom meeting with Scott and VHB and going through everything in providing supplemental information. Now, one of the big items that came out of our discussions and was brought up by abutters, and it's a valid concern, was at the time that the traffic counts were being made, there was discussion of there being ongoing construction activities, maybe diversions of traffic, whatnot. Scott was very kind to help us, and he has surprisingly very good records of what work was being done on those roads and when, and there was no impacts to the traffic counts with regards to any type of construction. So we were able to kind of put that concern to rest, and there was a number of concerns that VHB brought up in their review, but upon re-review, of the new information provided by our traffic consultant, there's essentially no further comments regarding what was provided. Scott can again speak to that. There were a couple recommendation items of you know, our application, speaking with Scott on whether or not there was any potential, anything that could be done with regards to a couple existing deficiencies at two different intersections, one at Tibbetts and the other a site distance issue. I'll let Scott speak to that, but from my conversations with him, he stated that that's really not in the purview of this project, it wouldn't be appropriate, and he's comfortable with where we stand with that portion of it. And then obviously the elephant in the room that I was chomping at the bit to get at was the project water supply. You guys have taken a bit of my thunder away because you've touched on several of these items, but I'll just remind the board that it was requested that we look at possibly getting a municipal connection. And as you noted, the Grassmere Water Precinct, we did reach out. We did want to actually effectively explore that option, because if it was possible, then it could, you know, be a viable option. Unfortunately, with discussions with their Board of Commissioners, as you noted, their sizing-wise, pressure-wise, the length of run that they would have to maintain via cross-country, it was not something they would be willing to approve. So we did explore the option, but we're now back to our original intent, which would be to do on-site private wells. There was concerns brought about the wells, and so we did perform as was discussed, a hydrogeologic study performed by that consultant group. I don't even know how to say it technically. It's a bit of a weird one. Vendandez. And so overall, I personally was impressed with the report. I think there's a lot of data there that was compiled. And what I want to remind the board that when we talked about this at the last meeting, I said there's no way to provide 100% certainty on availability of water, nor should we be required to it's not required under state law or under any of your regulations to provide that level of guarantee, short of drilling all 46 wells and seeing how things shake out. So we all agreed that that wasn't realistic, but what was asked is that we provide as much information as we can to provide a level of potential comfort or concern or addressing of concerns with that. And I think this report does exactly that. They detailed a lot of information specifically in looking through this. But the main piece, as Scott spoke about, is it's a data collection exercise. I wasn't aware personally how much data is required to be submitted to the state from the certified well drillers that provide this information. It is everything from the yield, the depth to bedrock, the casing length, the static water level. There's a tremendous amount of information, and it's required to be submitted upon every well. And so it is a lot of data. If, for example, if there was multiple or the majority of wells around our property that were very much substandard, that would be a reason of concern. The results of the study were very compelling, and I do have a couple of the exhibits that I blew up for that purpose, so that anyone in the public that didn't maybe have access to the study could see some of this information. And so,
Doug, could I just, excuse 1 second?
yes.
The study that was submitted to us is available for anybody that wants to read it at the planning office. It'll be available, if anybody wants to come in and read it, it's available to be read. We're not just reading it and telling you about it. You have the right to read it, and if you want to read it, it's available at the planning office. Thank you. Sorry, Doug.
No problem.
We can also email it to anyone too if they just contact us.
So, what you see here on this exhibit, and this is one of the exhibits that was contained in the report, is
What page are you on?
it was figure number 7, the NHDES well yield on the 11 by 17s within in the package. And what this shows is it shows the full limits of the property, as well as a little outline of what we're proposing as our open space development to scale and then a 1 mile offset radius off of that property, and then every available piece of well data in that vicinity and beyond. And what that data shows, at least on this particular graphic, is the yield of the well. And as I said, there's many different criteria and factors that go into wells, but this was one of them and one of the main components. And that is yield, and that's expressed in a gallons per minute of how much gallonage returns into a well casing and resupplies a storage on a gallons per minute basis. And so what this report shows is that the yield is, on average, very, very strong on the vast majority of these wells. These are well data on the Cinnamon Woods Circle. There's well data on Acorn, there's well data on Sage, there's well data on all those surrounding roads, as well as roadways nowhere near this development up to a mile away. And so when you take those, the average of those yields was 14.5 gallons a minute. Now, 14.5 gallons a minute is a very, very good yield when it comes to a well. And I'll talk more, again, Scott touched on some of that. There are guidelines at DES. They are not requirements, but they're guidelines. But those guidelines are significantly lower than 14.5 gallons per minute. The report, obviously, I don't want to read the entire report verbatim, but I do think it's appropriate to read certain sections of the report. Since we read the cover our butt sections, I think it's also important to read the conclusion sections of the report so that people have that understanding.
Try not to read more than you have to.
I will not. But I just think this is very good information. There was a section at the beginning of the report which talked about domestic well minimum acceptable yields. And I thought that was a very helpful section. It was all backed by DES criteria. And essentially, what that's saying is that what we'd be looking at was the 960 gallons in 4 hours. And that can be accomplished in different ways. So you could have because the other part of a well design is not only its yield, but its depth. And so how far we're drilling the well down. So as an example, and DES has this criteria, which was very nice to see summarized, if you have a very high yielding gallon per minute well that can recharge quickly, you don't need as much well depth storage to be able to maintain or achieve those gallon rates to have a perfectly acceptable well. And so it's a combination of overall yield and depth. So as an example, if someone has a 2 gallon per minute yielding well and it's only 200 feet deep, maybe that is of concern. But if it's 350 feet deep, it's perfectly acceptable. So it's the ratio of, whereas the flip side of that, a 200 foot deep well, but yielding 7 gallons a minute is going to be perfectly acceptable. So it's the ratio of those two numbers. And so it was interesting that he was able to summarize that essentially, if you were just looking to achieve 960 gallons a day, period, a 0.67 gallon per minute well yield would achieve that. Now, it's a very low number, but it would achieve that, which is why DES is looking for at least that 1 gallon per minute, to have a little bit of leeway there. But again, if you have a deeper well, you can achieve that same sustainable rate. And in other communities that I work in, Pelham, Windham, that have known water problem issues, that's how they get around these things. They get a 0.5 gallon per minute well, but they drill it 1,100 feet deep. Then you have your capacity. So obviously that's at an added expense and something that people would like to avoid. So the average depth that was found in all of these wells. And that is also detailed on one of the graphics in the report as figure 8, which was total depth of wells. And so every single well, you would have a corresponding depth and yield based on this public data. And so the average of those was 352 feet. That is not an overly deep well by any means in the state of New Hampshire. And so what this professional geologist is concluding is that with average well yields of 14.5 gallons per minute and average depths of 352 feet, there is plenty of sustainable water in this area. This is not an area that has water concerns. He also looked at specifics in how many wells, and not looking to hide data here, just whatever was there is shown. There was a few wells which did not have good yields, or did not have a great generating well. And it's important to know how many of that is. Is that the majority? Is it a large percentage? Is that because that would obviously lend to more concerns with additional wells being put in. What he found is that in that mile radius where 325 wells were in place, only 9 of them had a yield below that 1 gallon per minute threshold. So 9 wells out of the 325 had that lower threshold within a mile. That's only 3% of the wells in the vicinity. So when I look at this data as a layman when it comes to professional well, I'm not a geologist, but I'm reading this data and I'm seeing that if we only have 9 wells, some of which are on the outskirts on the perimeter of the 1 mile radius, which would likely have 0 effect of this development, that we have a pretty good situation here. And I think that this amount of data that we provided concludes that this is not an area that is going to be prone to problems. Now, one of the things that Scott didn't have an opportunity to mention is that his comment was well noted, okay? We took, one, the clarification on the overall yields. I think that does make sense. If there was one data point skewing the entire thing and the average yield dropped from 15 to 3, then that would be very concerning. But that is not the case. He actually not only took out that one high yielding well, he took out all the wells yielding over 100, which there are wells that will yield over 100. You can hit the mother lode. I have seen it. It happens. But he took out all of those, and it did move the needle, but not to a point that was of any concern whatsoever. It was, to just not misquote, within the mile buffer, it dropped that average to 12.8, and the average within the half mile is at 14.6, and that's at the gallons per minute rates. So again, still very, very high yield when you could have a perfectly acceptable well at 1 to 2 to 3 gallons per minute. And as you look at that in these surrounding areas, there's plenty of direct abutters that have 15, 20 gallons per minute in their wells. So there is one that has a low yielding well, and I think we heard from that particular abutter. And so obviously, telling the truth, we're not contesting that, and the data is there to show it. But that is an abnormality in this data set, without question, based on what we're seeing. The other thing that we asked him to do is speak to that statement regarding the excessive irrigation, and because I myself, when I looked at that, I said, that could be taken a few different ways. Are you saying that, these yields are not acceptable for general irrigation? Are you saying that people can't have swimming pools? What are you saying here? And so he clarified. I have copies of this memo, which I can provide to you, but I will just read this one piece of this memo. And it states, his response to Scott's question, number 11, in the memo was, it is important to not take this limitation statement out of context of the report's conclusion which is, quote, "The aggregate impact of withdrawals from bedrock wells serving the subdivision is not likely to produce undesirable impacts at off-site wells, causing a decline in the water table that would interfere with residential use. Considering the large number of well records in the area documenting adequate yields and moderate well depths, the confidence in this assessment of low risk is interpreted to be strong." End quote. Removing high-yield wells from the analysis in response to comment number 10 above does not change the overall conclusion and is a demonstration of the strength of our conclusion. The examples of excessive water use listed in the quoted comment would be considered either highly episodic in nature, example, the pool filling, and we're talking filling a full pool off your existing well, or highly irresponsible, excessive irrigation. High-intensity episodic well use could primarily impact the actual well and pump used for the withdrawal, so the actual well that is being used. Considering the high average well yields in the area, typical water uses associated with a single-family residence should be available for both abutters, surrounding neighbors, and new parcels associated with this proposed subdivision. Regardless, common sense conservation of water resources should always be encouraged by all water users. There is a considerable amount of information documenting responsible lawn watering available on the DES website and other online sources. So he provided that clarification specifically to Scott's, not question, but just notation that there should be some clarification. And that, for me, assisted in clarifying what he meant by that statement. Whenever someone is doing a report which doesn't involve actual physical drilling, there is no way to be 100% certain. And there has to be an understanding of, if somebody says, hey, you said there'd never be a problem, and we find out that people are filling their pools from the start with a well, that's a concern that they're not factoring in. But overall, these are very well I guess no pun intended, right? Very well generating wells. And so I hope that we started off a little nasty when I was hearing, just the talk of certain parts of this report. But I think that this is a very informative report, and it does talk about other factors that go above my head with regards to the type of bedrock, and there are documentation about that, and there's certain types of bedrock that have a general nature to yield higher yields, and it's supported by the data. So you see these areas that he has that are highlighted, and then you see very nice generating wells in those areas. So again, I think it's certainly within the board's purview to express the desire for additional information on wells when we're coming in with a 46-lot subdivision. It's not required at the state level. There's no mandate for that whatsoever. Legally, every individual lot has a right to develop their land with an individual well. It is their right per state RSA. But if there's a problem, it was worth understanding that. And based on some abutter feedback, we only heard from a number of people that had potentially lower yielding wells or problems with their wells. So we needed to find out if that was a large problem or maybe a more isolated problem. And the data proves that that is an isolated problem. So I'm hopeful that the board can recognize that the amount of data and time that went into this report was to be taken seriously by us as the applicant, by the applicant that I'm representing, and that they wanted this data out there. But I think it's very supportive, and I can tell you that there's communities that have significantly lower yields than this that are continuously developed all the time from a residential standpoint. So I'll end my little spiel on the water supply there. The one other piece I'd like to just mention, and I'll turn it back to the board, I'll be quick, is regarding the open space, because that was an item that was discussed. It was asked if we could reach out to the Piscataqua River Land Conservancy, thank you. We did do that right away. It was like I did it within 3 days after the meeting. They had expressed initial interest, and unfortunately their internal rules with how separation to existing homes and everything has to be, it was gonna never work. They wanted us to like have a partial HOA, take on portions of it, but give them just the bottom part, and it just couldn't work that way. So we did explore that option. We explained that to the Conservation Commission when we had a meeting with them as well as on the site walk, when we walked the site with them a couple months back, and they expressed very strong interest in the town taking this on. Again, we have no issue with that. We've said that right from the beginning, that we have no issue with the town taking ownership of this land. But one thing I do want to make clear to the board is that the applicant is not willing to go that route at the detriment of severe delays to the project. Because it is also in your regulations our right to handle this as a private homeowner association owned piece of property that would be collectively owned by the 46 unit owners, and we're happy to do that as well. And so I did hear some initial, feedback during the discussions that the board members the select board members were like, oh, we're willing to hear it, we'll think about it. It's not something that, if this isn't something that they're open to, we're happy to draft HOA documents. We do it on projects all the time. It's a very common form of ownership of open space. Those documents would be legally binding. They would still have open space restriction covenants that would go with the land. So that is an approach that we can discuss tonight, but I would appreciate if the board could provide feedback that either for us to go that HOA direction if we're not feeling that the town is interested in that, or if there's an ability, and I think Joanne had it kind of written this way in her report, that we're fine with obtaining a potential conditional approval of this project when it's appropriate, with that as a condition that we either that you guys take it, or B, we provide HOA documents. But we weren't looking to go 2 months from now of the back and forth meetings, which I understand why it's required. We have no issue with that. But we don't want the process to be delayed just on that one item when it's in our control to potentially do it as an HOA. So that's just our feedback on that. I know that was a lot of information. I know we have a couple new board members here that didn't get my extremely long spiel of all the layout of the property. I have plans. If you have specific questions, even if it's redundant, I'm happy to quickly answer those. But with that, I will return it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Doug. Does any board members have any questions for Doug at this time? Barbara?
Part of the conservation comments seem to indicate that they wanted public access to the property if the town was going to be taking it over, and they recommended a couple of parking spaces. So what's your position on that?
So we actually, in a proactive manner, I'm choking to death, I don't know what I did to myself, but
They're on the plan.
we added them to the plan.
They're shown on the plan.
Where are they? I can't
See,
find.
I can't
from,
either.
from the Acorn Drive end, there's 3 houses.
Which sheet are you on?
Let me
The
point right
picture
here.
on the front of your plan you got in here, there's a picture on there, and if you look in, you'll see the road bumps out there in that
Here,
section, and
where
there's
is it?
parking spaces.
Right here. And our thought behind that is that,
Gee, sorry, I didn't see that.
so it's a bump out of 3 parallel parking spaces. It would be paved. It would look very similar to what you see as a fire pull-off, for a cistern. But it would be.
Fieldstone too, it's similar to that
Yep.
one.
And we put it in that location because it's right along the access road to the detention system, which is a direct access point to the open space. So we're,
It's in the right of way.
if we end up going not that route and it's not appropriate to have the spaces, those can easily be
Please
eliminated.
here, please,
Show them.
We'd have to have the easement, so to do that.
Right here.
So I just asked the town engineer, the road that's gonna go down to the detention pond for maintenance, which is shown on the plan, is actually an easement to the town, So that is an easement that people could actually walk on to get
Well,
out
if
to
it were
the
the
open
open
space.
space, I wonder if we even need the easement. If
I'm just saying,
Well, I
it-
guess conservation.
No one's
owns
gonna
it.
be walking on
DEP
someone's private
does.
land. is
You
all I'm
need
trying
the
to say.
easement, just so it's clear what you can do
Yeah.
and not do on
Yeah.
it without any issue.
Our thought is regardless of whether it's owned by the HOA or the town, there would be a specific drainage easement
Yeah.
to codify where
Right.
Public
there needs
Works
to
has
be
a right to
specific-
go.
Yeah, there needs to
So
be
we
a
could walk
specific easement.
Okay, Barbara, keep going.
So, Doug, you have made it quite clear, actually, from the first day that you were here about your opposition to delay on approval of this project. So, you're here agreeing to proposing a conditional approval, and you understand it could include either the requirement to come back with HOA documents, that you're making it sound like you think that's all gonna happen in a week. And, I mean, quite honestly, it really sounds like that's what you're going to do. And if we decide we want the select board to take it, it's then another condition that's gonna be another month at least, month and a half. And you've made it pretty clear that's not something you're willing to do. So is your proposal to simply do the HOA at this point?
Well, I guess I was trying to leave it open to the board to, I guess, see your openness of, I don't think it would be necessary for us to return to this board with HOA documents. I think that that's a very standardized piece that would be reviewed by town's legal counsel through our legal counsel, and that would be a back and forth item that Joanne would handle. So my recommendation, or my thought, is that if that were a condition, that it would say that, you know, if the town is not interested in maintaining ownership of the said open space, that the alternative would be that it would be privately owned through an HOA, and HOA documents would be required to be produced, reviewed, and approved by the town's legal counsel.
Okay, I understand that, but I'm sort of a loggy, and I'm just sort of thinking of the calendar in my head. If the selectmen are doing this, there's gotta be a couple of public hearings on it, which means it goes at least to probably the end of April.
Right.
Conservation, you haven't actually responded to the conservation site walk, but previously you have indicated you didn't think it was necessary. If
Correct.
we're going to do that, conservation said they do their site walk in April and have their meeting in April, so, and I understand you want approval tonight so that you don't have to come back, and I get every time you come back, it's an issue for the applicant. So I guess I'm trying to nail down exactly from an applicant standpoint, are you expecting approval tonight, or are you asking for it?
Well, so.
And if you are, what is it that you're asking for? Because it seems to me of the alternatives, you've indicated some willingness to consider. It's at least a month before there would be signed plans, at the end of April.
Absolutely, and I can explain the rationale here, and I think it does have, it hopefully will make sense. So, yes, we were hoping that we put a lot of effort into getting all of these items addressed so that we could potentially have a conditional approval tonight. The reason we were looking for that is because a conditional approval does many things. It allows for negotiations between the owner and the applicant and the third party to continue to move forward. It starts a appeal clock for that to happen. We recognize that it's not ultimately going to put a shovel in the ground quicker, per se, but it does make a huge difference to, like, a conditional approval contingent on the Board of Selectmen having their 2 meetings and that taking a month. Well, we have a 30-day appeal period anyway, so they're now overlapping as opposed to bumping themselves out. It's a big difference. And so that's why we didn't have, I mean, we still have state permits that are coming in. That would be a condition of the approval. We know that we can't get you to sign this plan until those are in the door. But again, we're expecting those within the next 30 days. Both the wetlands permit and the alteration of terrain permit, we've already started response to comments on those, so we believe that will happen within the next 30 days. So a conditional approval that allows all of these things to happen and allow us essentially to be looking potentially for a signed plan in the next 4 to 6 weeks versus the next 8 to 10 weeks is a big difference. And that's our rationale behind that.
Okay, all right, I understand that. I have one other question. There was an indication somewhere that you had a few comments, Scott had a few comments after the traffic study, and it wasn't clear to me that they had been addressed or not addressed. I know.
There's one comment that I believe needs to be addressed.
Okay.
And it's basically how they measured the queue length. I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't wanna bore anybody with the part that I don't know much about, but
You're looking at a board that dealt with Starbucks
Did
and queue
VHB
lines in
comment
114A.
on that?
It's
Correct.
VHB's comment.
Okay,
and-
so this comment is
Okay.
from VHB.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we could just get like a clarification memo, and that's that.
I can
that easy.
just throw in, Scott, just to let you know, I spoke to Rob Woodland
Yeah.
at Tetra Tech today. I asked him if he could check that. He did it the correct default way that Jason was asking. It just wasn't noted that way, so
I
he's,
think that all he was looking for was clarification on
it
how
was done by the
measured.
default 25.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
so, and we're happy to have him put that in a formal memo
It
to
could even
address
be
that.
an email.
It won't change any of the data in any way.
No,
Okay.
it won't. And then the other two things that VHB was recommending was the installation of flashing beacons for pedestrian crossing on Center Street, where I think like 4 people cross there a day, and that's just more infrastructure for the town to maintain. So I discussed it with Adam Jacobs, their Director Jacobs, and he was not interested in pursuing installing flashing beacons or the pedestrian beacons at this intersection. Just they seem excessive for the use that it gets and then the future maintenance. We have some currently on the rail trail on Henry Bridge Road that are broken, and the company can't even figure out how to fix them, so they're kind of a headache. And then the other thing was about clearing trees for sight distance at Tyrrell and Time, and the trees are on private property, so it's gonna be kind of an ordeal to deal with, but DPW can handle that without the developer. It didn't seem really anything to, dealing with developers can be painful, so to cut some trees down without their help is probably easier. And that
Okay.
was discussed with Adam as well.
Phil?
Yeah, when you mentioned the time on the report, it mentioned about that. And I know in the past, there were a couple of times where there was what was described as brush to be cleared. It turned out to be
Well, it's-
lilacs on private property, and the private property owners didn't have one cut down. And my understanding.
Which we could get in that situation. Again, we don't have the right to go in and cut, we would have to request the right to cut these
And
trees.
it's up to the, depending on what it is, when, and we've had several applicants that come in and they talk about the brush, and they call it scrub brush, and then the property owners are a little upset because they're lilacs, so.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just,
Yeah,
because it's
these
a
are-
state,
these
it's
are-
a
I think
state.
they're mostly maples, and they're
Okay.
about this big in the corner. And this is an existing intersection
Right.
that's, I don't know, 3/4, half a mile away from the proposed
Okay,
development, so.
all right, so we're still talking about basically off-site stuff that
Yeah.
we really are
Yeah,
not.
there was only
discussing.
one comment about the actual report, and it was the queue length, and
Okay.
how it was the queue
'Cause
length was measured.
He had
so.
mentioned off-site
Yeah.
things, and so, and then I have one other thing that I will say it's sort of come up in the open space subcommittee discussions. There is, on the plans, a line where the lot owner lot ends and the open space begins. So I don't know whether the board is interested, but we have had places where cutting becomes an issue, when people sort of think things are their own backyard. Would the applicant be willing to put posts with signs along this line saying open space or something to that effect, so that people are aware that they have a lot line there and past there is open space?
Well, I mean, yes, is a short answer, but just for clarification, all of these lots, and we intentionally made the back lot lines straight, you know, they're not these curved things or anything, and those will be pinned and marked, because they're all individual lots. So those will have markers on every corner, so between, you know, if you have a 100-foot wide property, there's gonna be a pin and a pin.
Not every resident even is aware that those type of things
Doug,
exist on their
the
property.
The past practice is if land is put aside for conservation land, we have required past developers and such to actually post the limit of the property where the conservation land starts so that it's clear.
They're little diamond signs.
Then yes.
Okay.
We would
It's gonna be a
happy
condition of
to do that.
approval if
Yep.
this, when time comes to you, we vote on this, but
Okay.
that will definitely be, because it's a past practice.
Okay, fair enough.
I've got a couple questions. Phil,
I'm done.
you done. So one, in the comment from the Conservation Commission about their site walk, and they're concerned about the verification of a vernal pool that may be in the area of the proposed road. I know we have, so they did their initial site walk. I don't know if Bruce Gilday was with them for that, or if they're asking for him to be there for the next
He
one.
was.
So,
There's snow on the ground, that's
yeah,
their
so
problem.
there's no way to verify at that time of year. I guess my concern is approving something, or if there's a concern that, because to me, if there's a vernal pool, that's gonna significantly, potentially alter the layout of the road and change this. So, I don't know if, I don't see any response here from Bruce to that
Yeah,
comment.
and I think we were, unfortunately, and I don't know the details, we were hoping to have a little bit more resolution with the Conservation Commission because Bruce was tentatively scheduled to meet with them last night, but that meeting was canceled. So, but what I can tell you is, I mean, I was on, both Bruce and I were on the site walk during the winter and there was snow on the ground. We brought, we brought the members right to the point of the crossing. And what I can say is this, as I described, I think in my first meeting, the crossing that we're impacting is a defined wetland, forested wetland finger channel. It has no criteria for a vernal pool whatsoever. And Bruce Gilday would be happy, and he was going to suggest this last night, he would be happy to provide a supplemental memo of which he would certify with photos why this wetland, forested wetland finger does not meet the characteristics of a vernal pool. And some of the ones that he described to me is, one, it's sloped, it doesn't hold water, or certainly not enough water that would be conducive to vernal pool habitat. It has a defined outlet because it's sloped, so it's not a vernal pool. It was, I mean, I can appreciate the Conservation Commission saying, hey, you're impacting an area, we want to make sure it's not a vernal pool, but we have a wetland scientist professional stating it is not a vernal pool and it doesn't meet the criteria. See, with a vernal pool, there's certain criteria that would have to be met, and then even then, you have to then verify if maybe it's a successful vernal pool or not, or whether there's going to be salamanders or the frog eggs and all that fun stuff. So if it doesn't meet even the standard conditions of being able to hold the amount of water that would be required, then it doesn't even require a supplemental report. So, but he will provide that, and so our position, and I did send this to Patty to forward to them, to the commission, is that we don't feel an additional site walk is necessary. We're happy to have our wetland scientists certify that that area specifically is not a vernal pool for the following reasons and provide photos. I think that should be sufficient to address that. I don't know why we would need to do another site walk for that.
Understood. My concern is that if we're asking, or if you're looking for a conditional approval, and we don't have that certification with us right now, that's my concern, but I'm just one person. My other question, and it's more for you, Scott, or I guess for Adam, and with all due respect to Adam, and I know not wanting to have, Adam Jacobs not wanting to have more, lights or, infrastructure the town needs to maintain. I mean, that is an intersection where students are crossing, and I'm just thinking where if VHB was recommending a pedestrian, signal or beacon at that Center Street, Terrell Hill, you've got students walking up to middle school, and maybe there's only a few a day, but I think there are definitely times a day where that's, would be a real important feature. And we haven't heard, I know we have a memo from the school district, and I don't think the school district provided really comments on, the student access and walking, but I just know driving through there, anecdotally, true, you just see kids walking, and I don't know that I would dismiss the idea of having some sort of pedestrian signal there, or if there is some other accommodation. I want to respect the, Public Works and not wanting to, take on additional infrastructure, but if it's something that the traffic engineer has, and I didn't see if he had specifically recommended a signal or what he, and when I say signal, not a traffic light, not a
No, it's
red light.
they're technically called a
yellow,
rectangular
green.
rapid flashing beacon.
Yeah.
I don't recall if it was in his most recent memo, but in 2022, VHB did a safety audit or something along the lines of a safety audit in the Grassmere area, and that was one of their recommendations at the time.
Okay.
And so I believe he points back to that in his comments.
Okay.
Also, Mr. Chair, if I could just add one piece of info. I think it's important to note as well, I mean, that was, what VHB asked is for our traffic engineer to review the VHB study and see essentially like if we agree with it or if our data supports, their calculations, because we were actually doing a lot more count data than they potentially were at the time. But one thing that Rob from Tetra Tech, our traffic consultant, wanted me to mention is that because of the differentials in traffic, and there was some rerouting, as we talked about at length last meeting, we have less than a 1% impact at that intersection from this development. So it would be one thing if we were making a existing poor intersection significantly worse, but we're really not contributing, and I don't think it would really be reasonable for, the applicant to pay for an improvement where they're not really causing a problem, any more so than what's already there today. So I think it's just that, that ratio, I was surprised when he said that, but it was a very small change to the overall traffic impact because of some of the changes in traffic patterns associated with the connection.
Okay.
I think it must be something he expressed verbally because I don't see it
Okay.
specifically in this response.
All right, thanks.
So I just want to address the timeline you were talking about with Barbara. The Conservation Commission wants to look out there, and if the Conservation wants to look out there, we're going to grant them the appropriate time for them to go look, because they're another town commission and we respect their opinions. It's an unfortunate fact that your application came in while there was snow on the ground and we really couldn't look at it. So you may have to wait until the Conservation Commission goes out and does their look and either confirms or rejects your wetland scientist's conclusions.
So with respect, Mr. Chair, if we have a certified wetland scientist that's providing a report with pictures that this is not conducive to a vernal pool, I'm not aware of any members of the commission being certified wetland scientists. Is that really appropriate for them to contradict a professional?
Well, it would have been,
We don't
it would have been
have
good if you had asked the Conservation Commission that question, and if they could have provided you with an answer on that subject, because we don't tell the Conservation Commission
I
what to
agree,
do.
but they're an advisory board, and I think we've given them their fair share of time on this, and we're happy to.
Except that you wanted them to have a site walk when there was snow on the ground, and you can't see anything when there's snow on the ground.
So
it's
would
just
we have to wait 6 months for any project if it's in the snow? I mean, that's just.
Possibly, if we had to have site walks and look at the ground underneath. It's not out of reason to want a Conservation Commission to look at the soils. It's just part of the process.
Okay.
And I know, this tonight is really your first actual night discussing this in detail with us, correct?
No,
You talked to...
no, I don't think so.
Well, you had another meeting, I stand corrected, we had another
Very
meeting.
long meeting, and I was happy to come back again, and I was told, no, we don't want to waste time until you have all your data. So I'm here with all my data.
Except for the Conservation Commission.
Well, again, as I said, if we have a wetland scientist that will provide that report, we're happy to have that be reviewed by staff, by whoever you want, but he can provide and certify that that is not a vernal pool and not conducive to a vernal pool.
Okay, we're not gonna argue the point, because it's
Understood.
I
point.
believe there's also a waiver request.
Yeah, we have a waiver request for the pipe. Would you like to comment on that, Scott?
Yeah, I looked at the cover, and there's actually only 6 inches of reduced cover, and it's not a huge concern. They've increased, or
Go ahead.
they've I actually think it's less than 6 inches, but they're changing the pipe type from plastic to concrete,
Which is stronger.
which is stronger. The pipe will be embedded in stone, which is typical construction. It's in their details. I don't think the 6-inch reduced cover is any concern.
Okay, thank you for your opinion.
Tim?
Barb, Bill?
Are we gonna address the school district's concern?
I don't know how we would address that, Bill, to be honest with you, because it's an opinion from the school, and we don't have it in our regulations to deny an applicant because the school thinks that the schools are gonna be too
No, I
crowded.
didn't say to deny it, but they had a concern with what the impact is.
Well, why don't you go ahead and read it into the record then, Bill, please.
Well, I mean, we just noted that we got other letters from the
I noted
butters that
that.
we didn't read into the record.
I
so
noted
don't think
that
we
at the
should read-
beginning of the meeting, that we received comment from the SAU.
Well, I interpreted that we were going to be addressing it later.
Well, then let's address it right now, Bill.
Because we didn't discuss.
Well, I mean,
Let's
let's-
address it now before they open the public hearing, so that it's been discussed prior to the public hearing. I'll grant you the floor, Bill.
I was just bringing it up that they had it. In the past, we've asked for a statement of what the impact would be on the school.
Without reading it verbatim into the record, the general statement from the school district, the letter that was provided, was expressing concern with the current school.
Elementary school.
Elementary and middle school capacities, or elementary school is the primary concern with the existing enrollments. And based on studies that have been done in the past in Goffstown to determine, the number of students generated by a new single-family home construction, a conservative estimate would be a potential for 1.64 additional school-age children. So the school district has expressed concerns with the existing class size at Maple Ave, with the location of this, these students from this development would be going to Maple Avenue, so they are concerned about also student transportation and current bus ridership. They would need to add an additional bus route potentially to accommodate so I think the concerns are understood and noted. I don't know that there's much that the planning board can do in terms of that, except continue with our impact fee
As
program.
long as it's addressed,
Yeah.
that's my concern.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. How long have you been going at this?
What's that?
How long have you been going at this?
2 meetings.
2 meetings?
My career or just this?
This project?
Well, two meetings, I guess 2 public meetings, but our first meeting was in January. We started the process having a voluntary meeting with the abutters at our office to
Okay.
try to address concerns. That was in-
After a conceptual here.
Yeah, you're here.
You had the
for
conceptual first, then you scheduled the
So
meeting.
how long have we been going at this technically? Is we started our survey and Bruce Gilday flagged those wetlands in June of last year. And we came in conceptually in August. We then went to final design, submitted everything in December, and, no, actually November, I think. And then we continued our hearing in December because we wanted to have the meeting with the abutters. And then we had our first open public hearing, which lasted a good amount of time. A lot of data came out, heard from a lot of abutters, which is what generated a lot of the work that you heard today.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Okay. As the new guy, there's a lot of emotion coming out of you.
There was also a presentation by Doug proving that the what we call the yield for development of these houses was, the number 46 was appropriate, which then led into how these 46 lots were laid out.
Sure.
Correct.
So just some clarification, because I think there's some assumption. Conservation Committee came to the select board the other day. I think they're very much in support of taking over that property.
Mm-hmm.
From the select board's perspective, we want to make sure that they actually have the means to be able to take care of that conservation land. That's what was this discussion.
Understood.
Okay. So my question to you would be is if this was in an HOA, how would you ensure that that conservation is also taken care of?
That's a good question. The HOA documents are an official document, recorded document that has all of those provisions built into it, specific to whether there are certain maintenance items required. There's funding mechanisms, everybody would have to pay a certain fee on a, yearly basis into a fund that would, maintain that. I mean, there's a small, I guess, taxation on it, all small, because it's unbuildable land, permanently restricted, but that would be factored in. So, I mean, in fairness, there isn't a ton of upkeep required, but I mean, there's certainly something. And it is done on a 1/46%, every person is gonna pay their fair share into that. And that's how it would be done as an HOA.
Yeah, so I'm in an HOA, so I understand how that works.
Okay, yep.
But I do think that one of the things that we agreed on as select board is that we don't necessarily want to have that contention if the HOA isn't going to take care of it. So,
Mhm.
so I do think that there is a process here, and it feels like we're trying to fast track it in some way. I think the questions that have been asked, I think, are fair.
Well, what I would say is that your regulations allow for us to choose how to do that.
Agree.
So if we want to do the HOA approach,
Perfect.
We're
Then
happy
I
to
think
do
that's
it.
what Barbara was asking. What are you actually planning to do?
I think if this is going to, what I'm hearing, if there's an impression that this process is going to take some time and that, because I'm trying to fast track, then we'll do the HOA.
But we also thought a conditional approval could be granted possibly that would allow for the selectmen to have the time to do their thing.
If-
And you can accept it or you can reject it, so.
If that's how we'd like to approach it, that's fine too.
It's
But
not cut
if-
and dried.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not, I don't believe we're trying to fast track this, I tried to give you that history.
Sure.
We're not fast tracking it in our opinion. There's agreements with multiple parties on this that have had executed multiple extensions already for this. So it is not being fast tracked in our perspective, but I can also understand where you're seeing, you just were asked about the open space component last night or Monday or whatever.
Monday, yeah.
So I understand how that can feel quick to you, and I can respect that too. If there's a concern, as I said, we were trying to be, I guess, team players. The Concom was very adamant that they would prefer it to go that direction. So, if we can make that happen, and maybe you can speak to this, is that process, this 2 meetings, could there be a decision in that 2 meetings, essentially a 30-day period, or are we talking, this is gonna be 4 months?
I don't have an exact time frame. I'm the new guy here, I'll be
Okay.
honest with you on that. But I do think that everybody on the select board is pretty sound, and they'll make good decisions if we have that data. We did ask the Conservation Committee to come back with a plan. There are 2 public hearings that basically have been outlined. I think we'd be okay with the conditional aspect of that. So,
If that's the case, I mean, and I don't know if you wanna speak to it, Maggie. Well, or just tell me which way you wanna go. It's up to you.
Well, I think the thing is that.
Can we find out who this person is?
My name is Margarita Barani. I'm one of the people that are buying this property and developing this property. I think from my perspective, we have lots of money, which doesn't make any difference to you guys, but as this proceeds along, it costs more money and costs more money. It cost me between the last planning board meeting and this planning board meeting, $50,000 to upgrade that water test and the upgraded traffic report and so forth, so it starts adding up. So you talk about affordable housing for individuals, every time you do these things, it adds up to what you're gonna.
Wait a minute, wait a minute,
I'm gonna
let's
start
stick
to
to the
say
subject
Okay,
matter,
well,
please.
well, the whole point is that if I am going to be spending 3 months to get this, I would prefer to have the Conservation Commission take the land. But, however, then we've gotten parking spaces
That's
that
already taken
are
ca-
being required.
That's already done on your plan.
Yes, it is. Now, if I was living in that area, would I want the town driving around and parking in, next to my house and everybody walking around in that piece of land? I don't know if I would.
Okay.
So, if it's just
Technically,
gonna
they
be
can park
constant.
anywhere on the road because it's
Yeah,
a
they don't
public
have to,
road.
yeah, they can.
But the
anyway.
land isn't, if the land belongs to an HOA,
Correct,
they can
yeah.
park wherever they want on the road, but they can't walk all over.
Correct.
Right.
So to me, a conservation piece of land was to stay conservation, wasn't necessarily to have everybody in the neighborhood walking all over it.
The whole, one of the purposes of open space subdivisions is to try to encourage passive recreation on open space in this town. That's one of the criteria for this type of a subdivision.
And I understand, and that's why we don't mind and we would actually encourage the
Oh.
Conservation Commission to take it, provided it doesn't take 3 or 4 months to do it.
So Doug, I'm guessing that based on the representation from the select board, there's gonna be a noticed meeting with a public hearing. Probably 2 weeks later, Phil, can they do them on a 2-week schedule, 2 public hearings?
I think it's a minimum, 2 weeks in between.
Right, so the second meeting of the month would be the second public hearing, possibly, and then there's at least, would you vote at the end of the public hearing in the past, or
There's usually a certain period of time.
You have to
waiting
wait a
time.
week
a week?
before you
So
can vote.
you're
So-
probably talking inside of 30 days, but I'm not gonna say that for gospel truth, but it seems like it could be accomplished in a
and
It's
relative.
roughly 5 weeks.
And we understand, and that type of time frame is totally fine, as I tried to explain to Barbara, who had a very fair question as to what my rationale was, is we obviously do have some tidying up to do on multiple items, but allowing a conditional approval to start certain clocks and allow her to go back to her
I mean, I have to do
buyers.
Attorney General approval and a lot of other things in the process, which would take 30 days, prepare closings and so forth. So I don't have a problem with that, as long as it doesn't come back and say, well, it's 2 months, it's 3 months, it's 4
Right.
months.
Well, then you could exercise your right to do what you want with the land at that point.
Correct.
Okay,
Fair, thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. I'm kind
Please.
of confused here.
Richard?
Doug keeps saying he represents a Belize company.
That is me.
Well, you just said you're Varani.
I am Varani.
Okay, so who is this Mount Arat?
Mount Arat is the Janigians that own
Oh,
the,
they own
Okay,
it.
all
that
right.
own the parcel.
So you're speaking, you're talking about spending money, but as the owner, you're gonna make a ton of money.
I'm not
Okay.
necessarily.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
This
No,
discussion
no,
got.
we never talk about what a project's gonna
Okay.
cost or anything at a
Well,
planning board meeting.
she just brought it up.
Well, I tried to stop her.
Yeah, well, my problem is she's speaking here as a fiduciary benefit.
Well,
And I, you know, and
I see what you're going at, but we never, ever consider money when we talk about planning.
okay, then I apologize.
Thank you.
So Tim, you said earlier that you would entertain a condition to allow the select board to do their thing, and then it would,
I said that we could discuss it, the board members could discuss
well,
it.
brought
I'm
it up
suggesting
for
that we put it out there,
suggestion.
yes.
And I would agree with that, because I don't think, everybody's kind of like you said before, there's high emotions in this room. I don't think people should be making a decision on whether the land's going to an HOA or to the Conservation Commission at this point. The
irrelevant.
hearings haven't been held yet. But I think what you came up with was a really good idea, and I support that. And I think the Conservation Commission should have a chance to carry this out if that's.
And what's the conservation scheduled walk, 15th?
I
The
think it's like the 19th.
22nd.
Well, the meeting is the 22nd,
So
but
they wanna have it prior to the meeting?
yes.
If it's a
So that's,
Saturday,
it's April 1st is Tuesday, right? This coming Tuesday?
Correct.
Correct.
So it's 2 weeks from Tuesday, they're gonna have their
Well,
walk.
and again, Bruce has already agreed to take them out there, he's happy to do it.
Well, let's-
But again, I don't see why there's any reason, with the level of confidence that our professional has and a report that he's willing to write, that we'll have that could be a condition as well.
This is your opinion, but the Conservation Commission is one of our boards in this town, so we are going to defer to their look at it, and we can go from there after they discuss it.
Right, and I think Joanne had as a potential suggestion that the Conservation Commission would have their site walk. If there was determination that there was a problem with that or a disagreement with that piece, then we would be required to come back to this board. And we're comfortable with that because we're very confident that it's not a problem.
Okay. Any other board members have something they want to ask?
So that would be number 27 on conditions of approval.
Well, it's 24 and 27.
Right, it's on both. Just in different scenario.
Okay. So we're not done yet by a long shot here. So at this time, if nobody from the board has anything else they'd like to bring up, I am going to open public hearing.
Number 21 doesn't make any sense. Sorry. I think it was one of the headers of my comments.
We'll take that out.
Sorry, just noticing that now.
Well, if we're doing generic comments, turn to page 10, Joanne. This
Yeah, I think
appeared in the previous one too.
I just read it.
5 to 7, I don't know why it's putting a number. 6 should just, I mean, they all end up getting renumbered anyways,
Yeah.
but 6 is not actually a condition.
So I'm going to ask the public, if you'd like to come up and comment, we'd like to have you come and comment, please. If you could, most of people that run these type of meetings give people a time clock of 3 minutes or 4 minutes or something. I don't run a time clock, but if someone's going to get windy, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, please. And if someone makes a point really loudly and very strongly that the whole crowd agrees with, please come up and say, I agree with that person, but don't give us the whole thing all over again. We'd appreciate it if we could get your comments in an orderly fashion, and then we could move on from there. So, the public hearing is now open. I'll ask Doug to vacate the chair, move around by Dave right there if he wants, sit on the end, and we'll open the public hearing for comment on the aspect of the subdivision.
Good evening, John Povelis, 44 Acorn Drive. Speaking especially for some of the members here who haven't been here before, as it was noted earlier, this has been brought up for several meetings now. They did also mention about a meeting with the abutters. It's kind of, I think, important to note that I don't really know the success of that meeting. This has garnered a lot of attention from the folks on Acorn Drive and along the neighboring areas where we've had our own personal meetings. I have yet to see a single person at one of these meetings say, I think this is a good idea. This is a public hearing or opportunity right now, and I really hope you listen to the public, because there has not been one group, like I said, of neighbors that are saying, this is great, we want to have more students in the classroom, we need to have more delays to get onto Tibbetts Hill from the streets. I mean, you know, we talked about emergency vehicles that can't, if my wife called me at 3:30 and I need to get to my house on Acorn Drive, I can't do it because of the traffic that's being held up on from Mountain View Middle School. We've talked about the wells, and those last lines that were said in that report that even stated that they cannot warranty, they cannot guarantee that our water is going to be fine. I mean, we all know the saying of, hey, it looks great from my house, and I'm sure that the people building this project are the ones that are presenting it. This project's going to look great from their house, but not mine, not from my back window. So I really, really hope that this board does take the opportunity to listen to what we're saying and put these plans together. And like I said, I mean, I'm looking at this picture here. There's not a single picture of Skyview of Goffstown that looks that convoluted. I heard that there's supposed to be a certain regulation where it's supposed to resemble the neighboring towns, neighboring neighborhoods, And I don't see anything that looks like a golf course in anywhere else in Goffstown like that. So, the expense of the roads all raises up taxes. Please, just put that into your consideration. That's all I have.
Thank you, John. Microphone's open, folks.
I'll go. I'm John Hartnett at 21 Ginger Drive. I emailed Joanne a letter, but I'll just try and cover some of it. Joanne gave me the hydrologic study there, and I went through it, and I was, excuse me, I'm a little more skeptical about it than you guys were. And the things that I noticed was in the first section, they optimistically pointed out that we received 33 inches of precipitation in 2024, but it failed to mention in the last 15 years the area has been abnormally dry conditions every year. Of those years, we've experienced moderate drought 12 years, severe drought 7 of those, and extreme drought for 3 of those. The period from June of 23 to June of 24 was the closest period to normal precip we've experienced in a great while, and the number stated in the report is misleading through omission. Section 1.2 states that the water table slopes from the ridge where they want to build the neighborhood, generally north and south. My neighborhood, the Cinnamon Ridge neighborhood, is north of the proposed project. The report extracts its numbers by including the area within a 1 mile radius of the project. The area includes many wells that are located much lower in elevation than the proposed project, as well as Acorn Drive, Cinnamon, Terrell Hill wells. Excuse me. Many of the wells used to calculate the average findings in the report are located at lower elevations close to Blackbrook and Piscataquag River. Most likely, those well depths and flows would be dramatically different than the wells at the top of Cinnamon Bridge, where they want to drill. Section 2.2 presents that the soils and the lineaments present are generally favorable to the water absorption in the possible high flow water areas. While this concept may be generally true, the report skews the findings by the inclusion of the wells at the lower elevations that skew the average depth than the report indicates necessary for the proposed project. And sections 2.3 and 2.4, the data aggregated for this report is data on file. The information of the wells the information of these wells can be 30 years old or greater. And obviously the conditions could have changed during the period, and I would like to point out that 2 of the wells that were on there, one is mine, one is my old one. So they're using data that's no longer valid. And it's probably a small number, but it's true. And my current well that is being used is the deeper and less productive well. I'm not going to read to you the findings and conclusions that the hydrologist came up with, but I'd like to say that the last sentence of the above paragraph, which is the impact of extensive withdrawals from landscaping, excessive irrigation, farming, and swimming pools, I'd like to say that that paragraph states that the withdrawals for water for the landscaping and so forth are not accounted for, as you folks discussed. It is a given that most of these homes will have irrigation systems installed, and in theory, this would nullify that report. I believe the numbers represented in this report don't accurately reflect the information needed to make a sound determination about the impact the 42 wells in the proposed project will have on the concerned neighborhoods. I believe the report should have focused on a much tighter perimeter around the project to determine the potential area of impact. Going out 1 mile down to low elevations does nothing for the top of the ridge where they want to build this project and our neighborhoods that are within about a quarter mile of this project. This is the water we're worried about. We're not worried about the water at the bottom of the hill right now. So this is what my concern is. This is in my letter, so I'll just try and get by this here. Let's see. So despite the report's findings, many residents are, no pun intended again, well aware of the fragility of our wells and the quality of our water. I submit the information provided in this report is essentially useless to allay the concerns of the residents and hopefully the planning board members. We are telling you we have deep concerns about our wells, and we're asking for some safeguards to be enacted to protect us in the event of our wells' failure, if this is approved. While it would probably be impossible for a resident to prove well failure is related to the project, the coincidence wouldn't be able to be denied. But the coincidences don't guarantee that the cost of the new well will be covered, and the burden will fall on the affected property owner. This would be fundamentally wrong, in my opinion. And I added more comments about the traffic that you guys can read when Joanne gets my letter out to you. I'd like to say that the meeting that he said they had, it came after the initial meeting. During the meeting, Doug even stated to us, we're not here to get your opinions, we're here to tell you what we're gonna do. So it wasn't a fact finding and let us have your information. That would have been happening before the first presentation. And I would also ask, why, just because I don't understand, why is it that the board can't consider the effects that it will have on the schools and I guess the roads and so forth?
Thank you. Anybody else?
Roger Belrose, 127 Terrell Hill Road. I've been there since 1987. The project's probably not gonna affect my well, myself and my wife Ann. But I have some concerns about the report. I haven't read it, the groundwater report. Essentially, it's not a problem until it's a problem with someone that runs out of water, right? You have 46 homes, they're all tight together. You're gonna have 46 wells. The radius of influence is gonna affect, from one well, is gonna affect another well. And it's gonna draw that water table down. There's no way around it. You're not gonna have any control, even if you stipulate that you can't water your lawn, you can't do this, you can't do that. People are gonna do what they do, and it's gonna create issues. I totally agree with the previous speaker about the groundwater up on that hill. As you drill deeper, you're gonna have issues with manganese and iron and arsenic. That area is well known for all of that. And if it draws the water table down, it's gonna expose fractures that'll probably release those chemicals into existing wells. So they're gonna have problems likely have problems with their groundwater quality. You know, as far as yield goes, it's good, you know, if you have 1 gallon a minute, but you gotta have the capacity to be able to have that use. And if the well's not there, doesn't give you that capacity, and the head of the water in that well isn't where it needs to be, no one's gonna correct it. The homeowner's gonna be stuck with it. So unless the town can put something in here that has, you know, some teeth, they're just gonna do what they want. I mean, we've seen it in other towns, Pelham, where homeowners have wells and they're no good. You know, the state approved them, the developer drilled them, and they turned bad because of bad groundwater quality. And the homeowners are, you know, susceptible to paying for treatment to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars to be able to use their wells. And a lot of them that have treatment won't even drink it, you know. They won't drink it, they'll buy water to use. As far as filling pools, you know, it's a one-time thing. Fill your pool. You're probably not gonna have an effect on long-term groundwater quality or, you know, aquifer levels in that area. So that would be my concern, you know, from looking at at the project, that the homes are close together. You're gonna have 46 wells. You're gonna draw down that water table. It's gonna have an effect of the surrounding homes, you know, and the other thing I wanna point out is, when the wells were drilled, whenever they were drilled, that's when the report gets submitted. And if 50 more wells are put in around that home, that definitely has an effect on their water table and the drawdown of that water. So, you know, 900 gallons is turned into 500 gallons because the water table dropped. And unless it's current data, the data is just anecdotal. That's pretty much what I have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who's next?
How you doing today? Keegan Chassis, 77 Sage Court.
Say your name again, please.
Keegan Chassis.
Thank you.
I had a question about, I know there's something that you can't build a driveway within 50 feet of an intersection, but does it go the reverse? So there's driveways within 50 feet of the proposed road coming into Sage. I just don't know if it goes both ways.
So, someone brought this up already, and I don't recall who, but the way that's written is it's 50 feet from where the right-of-way meets the property line to where the driveway meets the property line. So I think someone's talking about a driveway that's across the street.
There's one across the street, and then there's
so that right-of-way is 50 feet, so no matter what, that driveway is 50 feet from that intersection. And then in the other direction, it was well over 50 feet between measurements. So it's the way it's written, so it's hard to get around.
Okay.
When the right-of-way itself is 50 feet, any driveway is going on the other side of the road is always going to be at least 50 feet from that intersection.
Okay. One of the big things about the traffic report that was done that I don't think takes into effect is all of the people that are gonna be coming from the opposite side of that neighborhood and cutting through to the school and whatnot, which...
So they did
Wait
try
a
to
minute,
model it.
wait a minute.
I'm
We
not
don't
supposed
do
to.
questions and answers
Yeah,
at
I'm
public
sorry.
comment.
No, I was just
So
stating
state
a
your-
fact. You started the answer, but I was
I'm
just
the
stating
one
it.
at fault.
Just
Sorry,
go
I'm
ahead
supposed
and
to answer.
give us your comments,
I had...
and I'll try and bring them up for discussion after you're done.
Right. I had just proposed, some streets are, they have a sign, it's just not a throughway, so which just basically means extra traffic unless you live there. You shouldn't be driving through there. And also it makes it so that Google and stuff like that, when you take navigation, it doesn't tell you to directly cut through a neighborhood, when it's not needed. I know on the way to my house, it's a simpler route to go straight and take one left past the fire station and go to our house. But Google will tell you to go down Lindsay Drive and go through all these little streets, and it's all private, to me, what looks like private neighborhoods. And I would hate if I lived on those streets and all the extra traffic was going there, and especially since, like I said, Google tells everybody to go that way. The water, also, they're at the top, all that water comes down to us, so, if they're sucking up all that water, I'm sure it has some effect. I don't get anywhere near 14.5 gallons per minute. I don't know where that comes from. I think the average in the state is 6.5 to 8 gallons a minute. But we just bought this house at the end of a dead end, less than 2 years ago, and now we're looking at 5+ years of construction right across the street. Just the neighbors putting in a pool across the street was 20+ dump trucks of dirt, and it was weeks and weeks of jackhammering. So. And that was one in-ground pool. So I can't imagine, 46 houses being done across the street from us. What that's going to do to not only the noise pollution that my neighbor constantly complains about, leaf blowers, never mind, a construction site that big for the next 5 years. I don't know how he's going to deal with that, but. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like we found our peace and tranquility and the deer and everything else, and then a year and a half later, it's gonna be 5 years of construction, and who knows what's gonna happen with all that stuff, so it's just kind of a shame to see what's happening to the neighborhood. And I don't think the neighborhood looks anything like this, so. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Once
Roger
again,
Belrose, 127 Terrell Hill. I appreciate you guys pushing to have the Conservation Commission go out and look at the property when there's no snow cover. Obviously, he had his wetland scientist do the job, and he's a professional, and, you know, there's a report on that, but the town represents us, and we appreciate that. You guys are gonna consider that and have them go out and walk it and confirm it. And as far as a delay, seems, this is my first meeting with this, seems pushy. I feel like the town's being pushed around to be able to get on a schedule that they have, when, you know, it really, we live in the town, and it's affecting us, and I'm not sure, you know, where they live, or, you know, you live, but it's gonna have a direct effect. The traffic's gonna have an effect, the truck traffic's gonna have an effect, the long-term traffic, Center Street, it's always backed up in the morning and the afternoon,
welcome to Goffstown.
you know, and it's just, well, I've been there since 1987. We never had that problem before that circle went in, just a FYI. But, you know, to have the town Conservation Commission go out there is, you know, I think a plus.
I agree.
So that's my last comment.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Whoever on the left.
Appreciate your effort.
Whoever on the left wants to come on up. Somebody was standing up there. Am I forcing you?
What?
Am I forcing you?
Wow, no. Hi, I'm Jen Pelletier, 18 Acorn Drive. I made some notes, and you can't see, so hold on a second. First of all, that's still holding it up, hold on. Okay, so I appreciate John's information on the wells and whatnot, because one question we had back there was about outdated data, so not just wells, but also you're really, really big into the fact you have a professional environmental someone to look at vernal pools or whatnot. And my feeling is, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but first of all, money buys anyone you want and any answer you want. But secondly, there is a matter of sway in that, as you pointed out with the information about the wells. So obviously having a second opinion, I'd feel better about. The other thing is, so are these meetings recorded?
Yes.
They are. As far as the record, well, you said it's not a question answer. I'm just curious, and at some point, I don't know if I can get some guidance on, we were talking about reassurance to our wells, and I have heard stories, or I've known people who have had issues with their well, and that can get very expensive. I didn't quite realize. And so I don't know if we can get any reassurance, or that's something we can demand from builders. But when Pasture was built, much smaller development, much further spaced out, our neighbor's pool cracked down the center. So it wasn't their well, but they still had to have their in-ground pool repaired. So I'm not feeling really confident that there won't be any damage. As far as the wetlands, that's another thing that I guess I'm looking for information. I'm still confused after these meetings how we're allowed to just fill in wetlands. So obviously I'm gonna push for the conservation.
Wetlands are not filled in. It goes through the state DES procedures, and DES grants permits to fill and dredge wetlands. That's a DES process.
I think the abutters got a letter though.
No, I'm just saying that
Okay.
any wetlands that are impacted by any development have to go through the Department of Environmental Services, and they issue all the permits for any wetlands work. We do not, at this board, have any say in wetlands permits.
Okay. I also wanted to know there was, well, see, but I'm asking for information, I'm sorry. It was drilling. I thought at one point you said there'll be no drilling, and But then you also talked about the alteration of terrain, and so I was confused what was being changed if it's not being drilled. Let me see. Oh, and then just as a general comment, I was kind of put off. I moved to Goffstown because it was a blue-collar community and have been very happy with the people and the community and the way it's treated and obviously green space and such. So I was very put off by the fact our realtor here shows up in her first line as something about, I guess she has a lot of money, or it is a lot of money, or she's gonna make a lot of money. And then to speak to the guy who last spoke, and again, is super pushy about how we can move it along and get it going. And then lastly, schools. I agree, I was in those schools 15 years ago when they were overcrowded, but because of lack of funds, they haven't been able to expand. So I think adding many more houses, and that's on top of traffic. So that's it. Sorry, I guess I didn't have that much to say. Questions?
You're just fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you folks understand that we are going to vote on an application at some time in this process. It may not be tonight, it might be at a subsequent meeting, so don't rely on having another bite at the apple for the public hearing if things change between now and the next meeting. So I want to encourage anybody who wants to speak to please come up tonight and speak so you're not left out in the cold.
My name is Sandra Webb Peabody. I live at 117 Terrell Hill Road. I have one observation that I would like to share. I did speak to the water issue at an earlier meeting and my concerns. After that meeting, I was in the town hall to pay my taxes, and I asked the assessor's office the procedure for the planning board meetings and if public comment was taken into consideration. And I was told that no matter the public sentiment, if the project meets the hurdles presented by the planning board, the project will be approved. Is that true?
Joanne, would you please answer that question for her?
The public's comments are always taken into consideration. The board does have regulations and the zoning ordinance that needs to be followed by each applicant. So that is like one of the most important things that they look at, but they certainly take into consideration comments from the public, especially the surrounding abutters.
But to answer the question, she asked a specific question. If the applicant meets all the rules and all the hurdles, even if the public comment is against the project, she's asking if it could still be approved.
It could be, yes.
So why do you have public hearings?
Part of the process, ma'am. Decisions change, conditions are made based on public comment. And that's a discretionary item of the board. The conservation is the same way. Conservation might tell us they want something, but we listen to what they say, and most of the time we do what they ask, but we have not done what they've asked in occasion. So it's not just, it's about rules and regulations, really, and that's what it comes down to.
Okay, my comment then, not a question, a repeat of my comment from an earlier meeting, is that I believe the town and its elected boards has a higher duty to the existing taxpayers than to new developers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I just want a couple comments. My name's Amy Schwinn-Art. I live 53 Ginger Drive. I'm in a butter. And I just want to talk on the wells. I feel like a lot of that data was from 30 years ago when the neighborhood I live on Ginger, it's about 30 years old. Is that data from 30 years ago, and how is that accurate? When I know neighbors have had wells refracked or redone altogether. Some neighbors have 2 wells. So how is that data relevant to today? And it doesn't sound like it matters, because he said that no matter what, you're allowed to drill a well, and it doesn't really matter what you're getting for gallons per minute. So I know that was a big, long process to talk about the wells, but it sounded like it didn't really matter. Am I correct?
I'm not answering that question.
All right, so, and then on the housing design, I missed a meeting. I thought that when we did that yield meeting, that we were gonna build the neighborhood so it looked more like Cinnamon development. Now we're into cluster housing. It looks nothing like where we live. And I'm just trying to, I don't know how this got changed.
It's a
And how-
requirement in the zoning regulations that if you have over 20 acres for a parcel to be built on, the requirement is to create a cluster subdivision,
Okay.
to encourage open space.
The larger plan that you saw is how they figure out how many houses they can do in this cluster. So the larger plan is, it uses all the underlying zoning districts, regulations on lot size, and they lay it out. That's how you figure out how many lots you have, and then they put them in the cluster division. That's the way it's written in the zoning ordinance / development regulations.
And that's great. It just doesn't look like Goffstown neighborhoods and the nice neighborhoods we live in. It looks kind of like we're moving towards a Pinardville type setup where we're all on top of each other. It's just not very attractive. It's kind of unfortunate. I know these people don't have to live there, but we do. But yeah, that's just my 2 comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come up?
Yeah, John Hartnett, 21 Ginger. Just going off of the comment about the planning boards here, it seems just to make sure that the developers or the applicants check all the boxes. But I'm just curious, do you guys have any discretion? I know you take public comments and you consider it, but is there any discretion that you have in making these decisions? Or is it, no, they check the box, we got to approve it? And also about the traffic, this would be one where I believe that, a lot of discretion would be able to be exercised by the board. They have another viable option to exit this proposed property, going through the lot that the seller of the property has, if they could access Terrell Hill directly. And then they'd be able to avoid a lot of the impact that they would have on our particular side of the neighborhood of Ginger and Cinnamon and Sage. Because that would be adding, according to their traffic report, which apparently meets the gold standards. And, we accept it all because it meets the gold standards, but you're not considering the change to the characteristics of the neighborhood that will occur because they met the gold standard for the traffic study, 492 extra vehicular passes every day through the neighborhood. So that'd be my question. What kind of discretion do you folks have on making these decisions?
Thank you. Anybody else coming up? Last call. Okay, we got one more.
Bill Estabrook, 122 Terrell Hill Road. We've been there since 1978, and the traffic up through there now is horrendous from what it was when we moved up there before. Now the fire station is even closed up there, so it's got to come out of the village because there's nothing in there. And the problem with these wells and stuff that they say won't impact, well, my brother lived in Pelham, and they put 3 apartment buildings in down the road from him. He spent $40,000 on his well the following month because they drilled a well and his went dry. So, I mean, it's going to be an impact.
Thank you, Bill. Looks like I'll close the public hearing if there's no one else left. Okay, public hearing is closed. Board members. So let's talk about the waiver. The waiver is for the drainage design. The Public Works Department has made its recommendation on the waiver. Does anybody have anything else to add other than what the Public Works has told us?
No, it's not different. It's a different piece of paper. This is just the test package. Yeah, it's that one. It's a single.
It's on page 7 of our report that we got in the mail. Page 7 on the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where.
This is the object request. Because they need to do a.
So does anybody want to comment on this waiver? Or do we want to vote on it, or what are we going to do?
I mean, the waiver request, DPW doesn't have any issues with it, and this is definitely a drainage/construction question, so if they don't have an issue with it, I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that the reduction in pipe size, the hydraulic capacity is met without
I
any
assume
issues.
from
Yeah.
what you have said.
And it's also made out of concrete.
Sorry?
And it's
It's-
concrete, yeah, they're
It's
changing
concrete,
the
yeah,
structure,
and this is
so-
just one small section toward the Sage end. I think it's literally 3 length of pipe. Or not length, but segments. 2 of them are very short.
I'm just drawing a blank on waiver of marriage for the motion.
I'll make a motion then if folks want a motion on the waiver. I'd make a motion to approve the waiver from Appendix C, Section 5E and 5N, drainage design to allow a 15-inch pipe where 18 is required and pipe with less than 3 feet of cover. And because they are providing concrete pipe instead, which provides an equivalent level of protection, meets hydraulic requirements.
Second.
Thank you, Barbara. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of granting the waiver request, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes.
Mr. Chair, I've got a couple just kind of comments and observations on, and I don't know if there's a layer turned off on a plan or we do require a 60-foot vegetative buffer, and I don't see that identified or called out here, or at least labeled on the plan. And I think at the last meeting, you had said that you actually exceed 100 feet, and we kind of said, well, will you give 100 feet? And so I just don't see that on the plan. We also, and I know that earlier in the meeting, it was sort of asked, will you provide those placards? The regulation requires that, so those buffer placards marking the open space boundary should be labeled on the plan, need to be provided in the field. It's a requirement of the regulation, so it's not so much should you as you shall.
Have you required they show them on the plan?
It's in our regs.
Something.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And a question, we're labeled, the open space is designated as open space, and we have, and I know this because our open space committee is getting intimately involved in our ordinance and regulation. We have different types of open space currently defined. There's natural open space. I assume that this is proposed to be a natural open space.
Correct.
So I think we just need that designated, that this is not necessarily a recreation space or something else, this is a natural open space.
I think the covenants and restrictions on the open space will clarify all that,
Okay.
because it says, what you can and can't do, and you essentially can't do anything. So you can't, it says, you can't cut trees or make ball fields or anything like that. You can
Yeah.
maintain trails, there's certain limitations,
Yep.
so.
Trails, and I think this kind of gets to the ownership. One of our requirements is that pedestrian circulation. I understand that if this is being held by a homeowners association, then any trails and things that are being done are for circulation and trails for the benefit of the members of the homeowners association only, versus when we figure out if this is going to be accepted by the town. I do think that it would be, because there's no sidewalks, and I don't necessarily know that, I'm not saying that sidewalks are required to meet that circulation or pedestrian circulation requirement, but I think that if there is going to be some sort of trail network, whether it's going to be for public or private benefit, there should at least be a note that there is an intention for that to be provided in compliance with the regulations. It'd be nice to see, a section of what the trail would look like, of what it would be proposed, and I know that that kind of needs to be worked out depending on what the ownership would be of the open space if we get to that. And then, like a minor thing, and more Joanne for you, the labeling of the open space parcel, I don't know that that meets our assessors, how they number our tax map, that OS1, I don't think.
They instructed us
Is that
to,
what
they
did?
instructed us to do that,
Oh, okay.
but we can
No,
double
if
check.
that, as long as the assessor's good with that, it just struck me as weird, and I didn't know how that came up with our assessing. But those are just some observations I just think need to be addressed, either through conditions or, a revision to the plan.
Doug, in conjunction with those open space placards that Colleen mentioned at the back of the residential lines, I would also suggest that where the subdivision line is going to be between the upper and lower parcel, that also be marked in some way so that when and if people do use the property passively, they don't trespass onto the other parcel, which is not the
Yep.
open space.
Okay. Good suggestion. Can incorporate that.
But all that said, and I
Should that
guess
be to the
my,
north as well, too,
my
then?
concern
Ginger
still at
neighborhood?
We
this
have to do the
point
ones on the north side too.
is the Conservation Commission, and not, and I'll be, like, I want the Conservation Commission to be satisfied, and that's, but my concern is more so, and as you've said, that you'll provide a statement or a document or verification that, and we do have to rely on a stamped plan or a stamped statement by a certified wetland scientist. I know you've said that he'll provide that, but we don't have that with us right now, that there's no vernal pool in that area, and we've got a concern from our Conservation Commission. So without having it, to me, a statement on, and having that stamped statement from the wetland scientist at this point, I wouldn't feel comfortable moving ahead with any action on this tonight without, just lacking that. So, and that's just my one thought as one member of the board.
Well, I think we could discuss the possibility that we could, if they do need to come back, we would outline issues that we want to talk about, whereas we would agree on other issues and not rehash the entire application again. Unless that's not permitted, I don't know. Barbara can advise me on that.
It's always open for discussion.
Right, that's what I was afraid of. All right. Joanne, do you have anything here that is outstanding at this time?
I don't believe so, let me just
Did you make a
check.
list by any chance? Or did Doug, you make a list of outstanding? The wetlands sidewalk, the wetlands walk was one thing.
I mean, I could speak on any of those if you'd
Yeah.
like. I
I
mean,
think
we
most
do
of-
have the buffer shown.
Yeah, I don't think you need to go through those were just, they're not on the plan, and those are all, most of those items are things that are just addressed, make sure they're shown on the plan, would be added to whatever list of conditions of approval. But the documentation for the wetland scientist could change the layout of that roadway. So I wouldn't feel comfortable with a conditional approval without the wetland scientist's verification that there's no vernal pool. And I know you've said he'll give it, he'll have it, but we just don't have it here at this meeting tonight. So that's for me, that's my one outstanding item that I need to see before I'm comfortable taking an action. We know that there'll be conditions on everything else, but that's my one, we don't have it right now.
So we're just looking for him to label the wooded buffer, right, or the vegetated buffer, because it appears to be there, it's just not labeled.
Yeah,
It's not
it needs to be
labeled.
designated and labeled.
I did it on the grading plans. I think it didn't make it on those packets, because
Yeah.
as I was reviewing your comments from the last meeting, I noted that that wasn't there. So I added it, made me miss the packet. And as I said, I mean, I just want to be clear that we would be fine, again, we're very confident, and I guess I don't know if I'm asking you to take my word for it or what, but I mean, I work hand in hand with our wetland consultant. He was on the site walk with me. We talked about that issue specifically, and we actually talked about, even in snow cover, you can see the grade and the channelizing, that this is a wetland finger, a forested wetland finger. So I don't think we realized until recently that it may need more, which we're willing to provide. And I don't see why that couldn't potentially be a condition if that was the only thing holding it up. Because obviously, if you can't provide that certification, then we have to return to the board. Because we're talking about there would be a potential design change or additional mitigation. But we're very confident so that we don't feel that that would be an issue. And if you want to make that as a condition, I think it accomplishes the same thing, I guess, is where I'm at. But it's your decision as a board.
Anybody have any comment on Doug's comment just now?
I do.
Please.
You know, there was a comment in the wetlands report as to the special snow skills or winter skills of the scientist out and walking. And frankly, I think that when you choose to do things in those conditions, and it's always a crapshoot in New Hampshire as to when you schedule it, whether there's snow or not, those were the conditions, and I think frankly the applicant has chosen to say that we satisfied the requirements, and even though conservation had indicated some problems and wanting to walk it when we were last here, your option was to proceed with a certified statement, which we do not have, and we've gotten much better, I think, as a board about not relying on things that we don't have or accepting changes at the last minute. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm here with an applicant that did a walk in the snow, knew there was an issue the last time we were here. Conservation did cancel their meeting, but as far as I'm concerned, they had indicated pretty strongly they wanted to do a site walk before. And knowing the Conservation Commission, I would have been surprised if they didn't still want to do a site walk. But unfortunately, we don't have that answer. So I'm looking at this as far as the Conservation still wants to do a site walk. So I am not so opposed to the conditional approval on 24 and 27, which would provide that a conditional approval, but the Conservation Commission has to get that done. We don't always listen to boards, and you know, it sounds like it's a pretty limited inquiry that they're looking for, so it's not like this is a question of any and all of the wetlands. So that's my comment on that. I took a look as to the well issue. You know, the report is what it is. It's a compilation of data which may or may not be relevant, and if anybody's lived in New England for any period of time, they would know that there really is no way to forecast wells or its impact until it actually happens. I appreciate the applicant doing it. I actually thought some of the graphs and diagrams and pictures were some of the best I've seen of the area and pretty interesting. But the reality is that our regulations do not allow us to require something else, and unfortunately, we cannot control the impact on abutters. And I don't have any doubt that there's going to be an impact on abutters just because of the property formation and the number of wells going in. The question is what the impact is going to be. Frankly, if there's homeowner documents, I want a condition in it that there will be no swimming pool filling from your well, because I am familiar with the place where there was filling of swimming pools done from wells, and people did need to to build new wells, but you can't find anybody to say it, and if we're not gonna fill it, it's not a big deal. But I say this for the purposes of the abutters. So I do think it's an issue. As far as the traffic, it is, I will tell you that these properties are developed with cul-de-sacs at the end. We developed a practice of making the cul-de-sacs go to the property line, because from a community standpoint, through streets, while people who are on dead ends might not like it, through streets are frankly what the town wants. They provide better emergency access, they make clearing of the roads and maintenance easier, and we pay the same as a community for the 10 feet of road or 50 feet in front of your road that isn't used that much as we pay for the roads that are thorough streets. So it is unfortunate that when you have these sort of big open spaces between developments, that if somebody chooses to be able to get an easement from someone to connect, I can tell you when the Sage Court was approved, that it was anticipated that any connection would be at the cul-de-sac, not through a couple of lot lines. But there was some private decisions made, and our hands are somewhat tied by it. Finally, I'm gonna say that the planning board hands are somewhat tied by our open space ordinance, because it is required for over 20 acres. And so we are left looking at what they are able to do under the ordinance. I will say, we are looking at the open space ordinance, and this to me is an example of why it needs to be looked at. As it was pointed out, the yield plan was created in order to determine the lots, and it created a development that was much more consistent with the neighboring developments, but that's not what our regulations provide. And so the answer to people here, and I think the board would agree, that if they meet our regulations, there is not a valid legal reason to not approve the plan. We can put conditions on it, we can take things into consideration, but the reality is we need to prove it, and to approve it. And I will say that a lot of what this plan is doing, the state, I mean, as a board, we all know, the state is pushing to be done as of right everywhere. So it is unfortunate, but I can say I feel my hands are tied to a great extent on this plan. I do think the conservation conditions need to be included or followed. I tried to look online to see if the select board had scheduled the public hearings yet, because you have the time period to be able to do it for your next meeting, so I'm assuming it's gonna be at your next meeting, but I can never get on the Wi-Fi or understand the website, so I couldn't figure it out to tell anybody that, so.
There's a bigger gap between select board meetings this time because there's 5 Mondays in March too, so it's like a 3 or 4 week gap between.
3, yeah.
Is it 3?
I think it was 3.
So that there's kind of a longer, so that might be why it's not posted yet, if they are going to post it.
Okay, so,
It could be
so
why.
the applicant may choose to do an HOA in light of whatever that process is, but I've said my piece.
Any other board members have anything to say?
Can I ask a question about the water study?
Yes, sir.
I didn't see the time frames of the information in here, of the data that was collected. Do you have the details of that?
So, I mean, the comments made by some of the abutters, I mean, they are correct. The compiling of the data is the available well data of when it was submitted via the well drilling company, which is legally required to do so.
Sure.
So, you know, if some of the homes are older, then that data would be older. Some of the newer parts, I mean, as you are all aware, the Spice Rack community is a multi-phase development, and it has happened over time. I was going to note, I was taking some notes myself when the abutters were bringing up concerns. Any new wells, if there was a poor well and they had to drill a new well, that new well would be documented. And
So you would have them both in the data?
Correct.
But I'm not sure that my question was answered, Doug, which is, what is the time frame of the data?
You'd have to go to the water well board and you'd have to record the data on the date that it was submitted to the water well board in conjunction with the depth and the yield, which they did not provide that.
They didn't provide it here, but I didn't know if Doug knew.
I don't have that. It was, I mean, it was a tremendous amount of data to compile, and so I think, you know, the date of the well wasn't one of the parameters that he compiled as part of that data set. I think the only thing I can add is that if someone has a failed well, then they have to do a new one, then that data would be added. So you're not really, I mean, I don't think we can make the assumption that out of all those data points, many of these wells are not yielding at all, because if that was the case, they would have to have new wells drilled or have them fracked, and that's also documented. So.
Sure, we just don't have any indication of that in here, meaning that we don't know if multiple people have had new wells drilled in a certain amount of time, or if the gallons per minute has actually changed over a period of time. None of that's here. Right.
Well, I guess that's true, but I mean, there's many years apart of all these wells, and they're all very consistent.
Wells are only sampled at the time of the permit.
Correct.
Beyond that, generally, I've never checked my well yield ever since the day it was drilled.
Yeah, I don't think it's the well yield. I think I'm more interested in the fact how many houses have actually had to get new wells recently.
Yeah. And if the old well is still included in that data, that old data really should be dropped and the new, it's been superseded by the new well. Because obviously they've drilled a new well, I'm guessing the new well was drilled because the old one was no longer functioning.
Yeah, much like the outliers that you have in the data to say that you're getting like hundreds of gallons of water, you still would have to take the outliers of the fact that you actually have two wells at the same property. Those wells that are no longer good should be removed as well. Well.
Generally, they're abandoned, and DES has an abandoning process you have to follow to abandon a well. Anybody else? So what's the board's consensus? Are we going to continue this to a date certain? Or would anybody have an idea to act on it tonight?
Make a motion to move to a date certain.
Second.
Joanne, what's on the calendar that's available?
Well, our next meetings would be the 10th and the 24th of April.
So what do you, is April 10th available?
Well, conservation.
So
wanted done in-
conservation
Oh, that's
is
right, they
meeting on the
don't-
23rd of April,
So it'd be the soonest available date would be the
4th.
knows you by
Now-
Phil?
Now, on this schedule, Patty has that other subdivision on New Boston Road on here, but again, I don't know if it's coming in or not.
Well, they're old, this is an old business, so they would come first anyway.
No, it actually would
That's old business.
be new business.
No, this one is old business.
Oh,
So this
yeah.
would appear ahead of that project anyway on the
Right.
schedule.
Right. Just saying there might be a lot of people for both.
No, then we'll have to,
What's the
Get
fire
some more
capacity of
chairs.
this room?
so, did anybody want to second Phil's motion?
I did.
Richard, thank you. Any discussion on Phil's motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All
Mr.
those
Chair,
in-
if I could just ask, I don't know if you were gonna talk about this, but I would really appreciate, I mean, if that's the pleasure of the board, that's fine, but I would appreciate what exactly why are we continuing? Is it because we want that wetland certification? Is that really the focus that's left? I just wanna be prepared for when I come back.
I think the detailed information or whatever is supplied by your wetland scientist and the Conservation Commission is one of the most important things we're gonna look at.
Yep.
Does anybody see any other issues that we have to look at? I mean,
That was the main reason.
most of the stuff is past the debatable point at this point, because it's been explained, and you can only explain it so many times.
I would think by that point you'd know what the selectmen's schedule is and be able to make a decision based on that too.
I just was hoping that, like, you know, if there was some drastic concern about our hydro study, I don't want to like have that come up at the next meeting.
I don't have a problem with hydro study, I don't know about anybody else. Anybody else have a problem with the hydro study at this table?
No, totally exactly what any good lawyer would tell you. I can't forecast the future, but this is what I think.
All right, so there's a motion on the table to continue this to 4/24 of '25. Any more discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
One opposed. Abstentions? So it's 6-1. Right, we have 6 voting members, 7 voting members.
7.
Thank you again for all your time. I know it's
All right.
another long one, but
Yeah, we're not done yet, folks, at the table. Is there any other business for the agenda tonight, Joanne?
No.
Phil?
What's that? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I thought you just said we're not done, folks.
Well, everybody's getting up and walking away. We hadn't had a motion to adjourn yet.
Yeah, but we can't vote on it, so we'll be.
You're welcome to leave.
Can you vote yes out there? Okay, motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion passes.